Hi guys, and welcome to the Gentle History Podcast. Tonight we step onto a dusty riverbank crowded with wagons, restless oxen, and hundreds of people staring west toward a horizon so wide it almost seems impossible. The air smells of damp wood smoke and nervous excitement. Wheels creak. Children chase one another through the grass. Somewhere nearby, a blacksmith's hammer rings against iron one last time before civilization begins to thin out behind you. It is an appealing image from a distance. Adventure, opportunity, fresh land waiting beyond the sunset. The reality, of course, is that you probably will not survive this. Well, statistically speaking, many travellers did survive the Oregon Trail. But as you stand here preparing to leave, you have absolutely no guarantee that you will be one of them. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, let me know your location and local time. It is always fascinating to see where fellow history lovers are listening from around the world. Now, dim the lights, and imagine yourself standing beside the Missouri River in the spring of the 1840s. The morning mist hangs low over the water. Hundreds of wagons wait nearby, lined up like wooden ships preparing to cross an inland ocean. Families gather around piles of supplies. Some appear confident, others look terrified. Most feel both emotions at the same time. You are about to join them. Behind you lies the familiar world. Ahead lies more than 2,000 miles of uncertainty. One widely accepted historical fact is that most emigrants began their journey from towns along the Missouri River, places such as Independence and St. Joseph. These settlements became launching points for thousands of people hoping to reach the fertile valleys of the Pacific Northwest. At the moment, though, none of that future feels real. What feels real is the weight of a flour sack, the smell of livestock, the nervous glance exchanged between spouses who have just sold nearly everything they own. You watch a farmer inspect his wagon wheels for perhaps the 10th time this morning. He crouches beside the spokes, running his fingers across the wood as if searching for flaws invisible to everyone else. A young mother folds blankets with careful precision. Nearby, two boys are far more interested in climbing a fence than contemplating the dangers of crossing a continent. Children often adapted to the journey faster than adults. Adults carried responsibility. Children carried curiosity. The contrast becomes obvious almost immediately. You hear conversations drifting through the crowd. People discuss rivers they have never seen, mountains they have never climbed, territories they have never visited. Everyone seems to possess advice. Much of that advice contradicts other advice. One traveller insists that extra furniture is essential. Another claims furniture is dead weight. One family packs books. Another abandons nearly every possession except food. The trail has not even begun, and already uncertainty rules the day. An unusual tidbit from emigrant accounts describes travellers bringing surprisingly impractical items. Some packed delicate china, others carried heavy rocking chairs. A few even transported musical instruments large enough to occupy precious wagon space. Many of those treasured belongings would eventually be left beside the trail. People often discovered that sentiment weighs far more than wood. As the sun rises higher, activity intensifies. Oxen are harnessed, ropes are tightened, barrels are secured. The sounds blend into a strange orchestra of migration. Leather creaks, animals snort, metal rattles. Voices call instructions across the camp. You begin to understand something important. The Oregon Trail is not a road. Modern maps sometimes create that illusion. In reality, you are preparing to follow a broad corridor across prairies, rivers, deserts, and mountains. There are landmarks. There are common routes. but much of the journey remains unpredictable. The uncertainty creates both freedom and danger. A question that continues to intrigue researchers is whether many emigrants fully understood the scale of what awaited them. Historians still argue whether optimistic guidebooks encouraged unrealistic expectations, or whether travellers knowingly accepted enormous risks in pursuit of opportunity. Either way, optimism remains remarkably common. Perhaps it has to be. Without optimism, nobody would leave. You notice an elderly couple sitting quietly near their wagon. Unlike many others, they are not rushing. They simply watch the preparations unfold. Their expressions reveal something familiar. Not excitement, not fear, acceptance. The decision has already been made. There is no point second-guessing it now. That attitude appears repeatedly throughout emigrant journals. Once the journey begins, hesitation becomes a luxury. The trail rewards movement. You wander through camp. Each wagon tells a different story. One belongs to newlyweds. Another carries 3 generations of the same family. A third contains a widow travelling with relatives after losing her husband. People come west for countless reasons. Some seek farmland. Some seek financial opportunity. Some seek reinvention. Some simply seek escape. A few travellers are chasing dreams. Others are running from disappointments. The trail welcomes both. The afternoon grows warmer. Dust begins rising beneath boots and wagon wheels. You can taste it on your tongue. The Missouri River glitters under sunlight. It seems calm, almost peaceful. Yet many emigrants later describe departure day as emotionally overwhelming. For many, this was the last glimpse of familiar surroundings they would ever see. That realization settles quietly over the camp. Not everyone speaks about it. Not everyone even acknowledges it. But it lingers. A daughter hugs relatives she may never meet again. A friend shakes hands longer than necessary. A grandfather stares toward town one final time. Parting has its own sound. It is softer than excitement, softer than fear, almost invisible. Late in the day, final preparations continue. Food supplies are counted again. Tools are inspected again. Animals are checked again. Nobody fully trusts their own readiness. That feeling, surprisingly, is probably appropriate. No amount of preparation can eliminate uncertainty. The western horizon glows gold beneath the lowering sun. Somewhere beyond that distant line lie vast prairies, buffalo herds, mountain passes, and challenges impossible to imagine from this riverbank. But those concerns belong to future days. Tonight, the journey still exists mostly in imagination. Campfires appear one by one. Wood smoke drift across the gathering darkness. Families share meals while discussing plans for tomorrow. Children slowly grow sleepy. Even the animals seem calmer. The atmosphere softens. The enormous migration pauses briefly between decision and action. You sit near the fire, listening to crackling wood. The flames illuminate faces that tomorrow will begin changing. The trail has a way of doing that. Miles reshape people. Hardship reshapes people. Success reshapes people too. For now, however, everyone remains suspended between 2 worlds. The old life has ended. The new one has not quite begun. And as stars emerge above the Missouri River, you settle into the strange stillness that comes before movement, before dust, before endless prairie, before the first hints of autumn and the distant threat of snow that nobody wishes to discuss just yet. Tomorrow, the wagons roll west. The next morning arrives quietly. Before sunrise, camp is already awake. The stars still linger overhead, fading slowly as a pale grey light spreads across the eastern horizon. Campfires crackle. Coffee boils in blackened pots. Oxen shuffle through the grass, their breath visible in the cool dawn air. Yesterday was about leaving. Today is about deciding what truly matters. As preparations continue, you begin noticing piles of possessions scattered throughout camp. Some belong in wagons, others will never travel another mile. The West has a way of forcing difficult choices before the journey even begins. Every wagon has limits, every animal has limits, every traveller has limits too. One well-established historical reality is that emigrant wagons could carry only a finite amount of weight before becoming dangerously difficult for oxen to pull over thousands of miles. Families constantly balanced the desire for comfort against the need for practicality. That balance was rarely easy. You watch a family debating over a wooden chest. The chest is beautiful, hand-carved, polished, probably treasured for years. It is also extremely heavy. Several relatives argue about its importance. One insists it contains valuable keepsakes. Another points towards sacks of flour and asks a simple question. Would you rather carry memories or food? Nobody answers immediately. The silence says enough. Eventually the chest remains behind. The decision hurts. You can see it. A surprising detail from trail accounts reveals that discarded possessions often created strange scenes along the route. Travellers reported seeing abandoned pianos, furniture, stoves, and household items sitting alone on the prairie like forgotten monuments to optimism. At this moment, however, nobody is thinking about future abandonments. They are still trying to choose correctly. The challenge begins with food. Barrels of flour stand beside sacks of beans. Bacon hangs from storage racks. Coffee occupies a nearly sacred status. Sugar receives careful attention. Many emigrants understood that food represented survival far more than comfort. A chair can be abandoned. Dinner cannot. You kneel beside a wagon while supplies are loaded. The process resembles solving an impossible puzzle. Heavy items must remain balanced. Fragile items require protection. Frequently used tools need easy access. Everything else competes for whatever space remains. The wagon itself suddenly seems much smaller than expected. Perhaps that is one of the first lessons of the Oregon Trail. The American continent looks enormous. A wagon looks tiny. Somewhere between those two realities, families attempt to fit their entire future. Children wander through the activity. Many remain blissfully unconcerned. A boy proudly carries a wooden toy horse. A girl refuses to part with a rag doll. Parents often allowed children small personal treasures even when space was scarce. The psychological value mattered. Long journeys require more than calories. They require comfort, hope, familiarity. The smell of fresh-cut wood drifts through camp. Nearby, a man modifies part of his wagon. Hammer strikes echo across the morning. Others sharpen knives or repair harnesses. Preparation never truly ends. Each completed task reveals 3 more waiting. You remember the nervous farmer from yesterday inspecting his wagon wheels. He's doing it again. This time he appears even more concerned. Perhaps he imagines every bump, every rut, every river crossing still ahead. He's not entirely wrong. Wheels are among the most important parts of the entire operation. Without them, progress stops. Simple, brutal, final. Researchers continue discussing how accurately many emigrants estimated supply needs before departure. Some scholars suggest that successful preparation often depended less on wealth and more on practical frontier experience accumulated before the journey began. That observation becomes easy to understand as you watch camp life unfold. Experience matters. A family accustomed to farming, hunting, and repairing equipment possesses advantages impossible to purchase. Money helps. Knowledge helps more. By midday the sun grows stronger, heat settles over the camp, dust rises with every movement. The smell of livestock becomes impossible to ignore. Oxen stand patiently while being loaded with responsibility they never volunteered to accept. These animals will soon become the true heroes of the trail. Unlike horses, oxen are slower. They're also durable, steady, remarkably resilient. Many emigrants trusted them with their lives. The animals chew calmly while humans worry endlessly. There's probably a lesson hidden somewhere in that contrast. Nearby, a woman carefully wraps several books in cloth. Books occupy valuable space, yet many families brought them anyway. Bibles were common. School books appeared frequently. Sometimes novels made the journey as well. Long evenings on the prairie created opportunities for reading when conditions allowed. It is easy to imagine pioneers thinking only about survival. The reality was more complicated. People still desired learning, entertainment, connection. A fascinating little-known anecdote appears in several emigrant stories involving treasured family clocks. Travellers occasionally carried clocks west despite their fragility, only to discover that endless jolting roads made accurate timekeeping almost impossible. Imagine carrying a clock across half a continent only to have it develop a personality of its own. The afternoon continues. More possessions disappear from packing lists. Extra clothing is reconsidered. Kitchen tools are debated. Decorations quietly vanish. The process resembles editing a story. Every unnecessary detail must go. Only essentials survive. Sometimes, the problem, of course, is deciding what counts as essential. You hear one traveller describe a favourite blanket, another praises a particular skillet, someone else insists spare rope is worth its weight in gold. All of them speak from experience, all of them sound convincing. If anything, preparation becomes more confusing the more advice you receive. Late in the day, a family gathers round a small pile of belongings left behind. Nobody speaks. The items represent pieces of their previous life. A mirror, a chair, several household objects. Nothing dramatic. Yet abandoning them feels strangely emotional. Migration involves loss long before tragedy enters the picture. Even successful journeys require sacrifice. The sun begins descending toward the horizon. Golden light spreads across the camp. Wagons cast long shadows over the grass. Most packing decisions are finally complete. Not because certainty has arrived, because time has run out. Eventually every emigrant reaches the same conclusion. You prepare as well as possible. Then you go. Night approaches. Campfires reappear. The familiar scent of wood smoke drifts through the cooling air. People discuss tomorrow's departure. Some sound excited, others sound apprehensive. Many alternate between the two emotions every few minutes. You sit near the fire watching sparks rise toward the stars. The wagon beside you now contains a carefully edited version of someone's life. Not the whole story, only the pieces considered necessary for crossing a continent. Whether those choices prove wise remains unknown. The prairie beyond camp lies hidden in darkness. The rivers, the buffalo, the mountains, the storms, all still waiting, for now, though. The wagons stand ready. The sorting is finished, the weighing is finished, the difficult decisions are finished, or at least everyone hopes they are. Tomorrow the wheels begin turning, and the true test of every choice packed inside those wooden wagons finally begins. Morning arrives with the sound of movement, not dramatic movement, not heroic movement, just thousands of small sounds combining into something larger, a wagon wheel turning, a harness tightening, an ox snorting impatiently, boots brushing through damp grass. The great migration west begins not with a triumphant charge, but with a slow, creaking shuffle. You step onto the trail and quickly discover a truth that many modern people find surprising. You're not riding in the wagon, at least not very often. One of the most widely accepted facts about the Oregon Trail is that most emigrants walked much of the journey. Wagons carried supplies, food, and essential possessions. There was rarely enough room or opportunity for healthy adults to spend entire days riding comfortably inside. The image of pioneers sitting peacefully in wagons while scenery drifts by belongs mostly to imagination. Reality feels different. Reality feels like dust. You walk beside the wagon as it rolls forward. The wooden wheels groan softly. The oxen move at a steady pace, not fast, not slow, simply relentless. Their rhythm soon becomes your rhythm, step after step, hour after hour, mile after mile. At first the movement feels exciting. Every turn of the wheel carries you farther from the Missouri River, farther from familiar towns, farther from the life you once knew. The prairie unfolds ahead like an endless sea. Tall grasses sway beneath the morning breeze. Birds circle overhead. The sky seems impossibly large. For a while, it's easy to focus on the beauty. Then your feet begin reminding you that beauty can be exhausting. The trail quickly teaches patience. You cannot rush oxen. You cannot rush wagons. You certainly cannot rush an entire wagon train. Everything moves according to a pace established by animals, terrain, weather, and practical necessity. Many emigrants covered between 10 and 15 miles on a typical day under favourable conditions. That sounds manageable until you remember that tomorrow requires another 10 or 15 miles, and the day after that, and the day after that. A curious observation appears in several trail diaries. Travellers sometimes remark that they gradually lost their sense of ordinary distance. A 5-mile walk that might seem significant back home became almost meaningless once the journey stretched across thousands of miles. Perspective changes surprisingly fast. By midday, the novelty begins wearing away. You adjust clothing. You shift weight from one foot to the other. You search for comfortable walking patterns. The wagon beside you rattles constantly. Every bump sends vibrations through the wooden frame. You begin understanding why delicate furniture rarely survived the entire journey. The prairie itself feels alive. Wind brushes across the grass. Insects hum in the sunlight. Meadowlarks sing from distant perches. The landscape appears peaceful, yet it also feels immense enough to swallow entire groups of travellers without effort. That sensation lingers at the edge of your thoughts. The horizon never seems closer. No matter how long you walk, it remains distant, untouchable. Perhaps that is one reason the West inspired both wonder and anxiety. Its scale challenges human expectations. Around noon, the wagon train pauses. Animals require rest. People require rest too. The stop is brief, but welcome. Families unpack simple meals, bread, bacon, coffee, sometimes beans. Nothing fancy. Nobody expects fancy. You sit in the shade cast by a wagon and remove your hat for a moment. The relief feels glorious. Already your shoulders ache slightly. Already your boots feel heavier than they did this morning, and this is only the beginning. Researchers continue debating how quickly emigrants adapted physically to trail life. Some historians suggest that many travellers developed greater endurance within weeks, while others emphasize the persistent fatigue described throughout numerous personal journals. Both explanations probably contain some truth. People adapted. They also got tired. Those two realities can coexist quite comfortably. The journey resumes. Afternoon sunlight bathes the prairie in warm gold. The wagon train stretches across the landscape. From a distance, it resembles a moving village. Families talk while walking. Children occasionally ride for short periods. Older travellers pace themselves carefully. Everyone learns. Everyone adjusts. One particularly charming detail from emigrant accounts describes travellers creating informal competitions during long days on the trail. Children raced alongside wagons. Adults compared walking distances. Some even tracked unusual sights as a form of entertainment. Humans have always found creative ways to pass time, especially when confronted with endless horizons. You notice how quickly practical concerns dominate conversation. People discuss water, grass quality, road conditions, animal health. The subjects may sound mundane, yet each one directly influences survival. A broken wheel can delay an entire group. A sick ox can create serious problems. A poor campsite can ruin an evening. The trail transforms ordinary details into important decisions. As afternoon progresses, you begin recognizing the sounds of wagon travel, the constant creak of wood, the soft clink of metal chains, the rustle of canvas covers catching the breeze. Soon these sounds become part of daily life. At first they seem loud. Later they become background music. The same transformation happens with many aspects of trail existence. What initially feels strange eventually feels normal. By late afternoon, the excitement of departure has evolved into something steadier. Determination. You are no longer imagining the journey. You're living it. That distinction matters. Dreams feel different once they become reality. The wagon train eventually stops for the evening. The decision seems almost magical. One moment everyone is moving. The next moment camp begins forming. Animals are unhitched. Fires are prepared. Water is collected. The temporary community emerges with remarkable efficiency. People know what needs doing. The routine is already taking shape. You help gather fuel. The smell of grass and earth fills the cooling air. Shadows lengthen across the prairie. The western sky glows orange and pink. For a few moments the landscape becomes breathtakingly beautiful. Even the tired travellers pause to admire it. A recurring question among scholars concerns how emigrants emotionally balanced hardship with wonder. Historians still argue whether the beauty of the Western landscape significantly offset daily difficulties, or whether modern interpretations sometimes romanticize experiences that participants found primarily exhausting. The answer likely varied from person to person. Human experiences rarely fit neatly into one category. As darkness settles, campfires appear across the prairie. Their flickering light creates islands of warmth beneath a vast sky. The stars emerge one by one. Without city lights, they seem astonishingly bright, almost overwhelming. You sit near the fire eating a simple meal. The food tastes better than expected. Perhaps hunger helps. Perhaps fresh air helps. Perhaps effort improves everything slightly. Nearby, conversations drift through the evening. People compare impressions of the first day. Some expected faster progress. Others expected worse conditions. Most are simply relieved to have begun. The uncertainty of waiting has ended. The certainty of movement has taken its place. You stretch tired legs toward the fire. Tomorrow will bring another day of walking, another day of creaking wheels, another day of endless prairie, and slowly, almost without noticing, the rhythm of the Oregon Trail is beginning to settle into your bones. By the fourth day, or perhaps the fifth, depending on how carefully you count, the prairie begins playing a curious trick on your mind. At first glance, everything appears unchanged. Grass, sky, wagons, dust, repeat. Yet as the miles accumulate, subtle differences emerge. The grass shifts colour. The wind changes character. The land rises and falls in gentle waves. The sunlight itself seems different out here. Brighter somehow, as though nothing exists between the heavens and the earth except distance. You wake before dawn and immediately smell campfire embers lingering from the night before. The air feels cool against your skin. For a brief moment, before the day's movement begins, the prairie seems peaceful enough to convince you that this entire journey might be easier than expected. Then the dust arrives. One well-documented aspect of trail travel was the near-constant presence of dust during dry conditions. Thousands of hooves, wagon wheels, and boots churn the earth into fine clouds that could linger in the air for hours. You quickly learn that dust gets everywhere. It settles on clothing. It coats food. It works its way into blankets. It clings to faces. Even your coffee occasionally develops an earthy flavour nobody ordered. As the wagon train starts moving, sunlight filters through pale brown clouds kicked up by the animals ahead. The particles hang suspended in the air. Sometimes the landscape appears slightly blurred, almost dreamlike, until you inhale deeply. Then it becomes very real again. The oxen continue their steady march. You're beginning to appreciate them more each day. Unlike people, they rarely complain. Unlike people, they do not spend evenings debating routes, weather forecasts, or the quality of tomorrow's campsites. They simply move, forward, patiently, relentlessly. You follow. The prairie stretches outward in every direction. At times, the openness feels liberating. At other times, it feels almost overwhelming. Modern travellers often underestimate the psychological effect of immense empty spaces. Back east, landmarks constantly surround you. Trees, buildings, roads, fences. Here, the world seems stripped down to essentials. Earth below, sky above. The simplicity carries its own strange beauty. As morning progresses, you notice wildlife more frequently. Small animals dart through the grass. Birds drift overhead. Occasionally a distant shape appears on the horizon, visible for hours before you finally understand what it is. The prairie teaches patience. Everything takes longer than expected. Distances deceive constantly. A hill that appears nearby may require half a day to reach. A river that seems close can remain frustratingly distant. Many emigrants commented on this peculiar effect. The vastness of the landscape altered ordinary perceptions of space. An intriguing little-known observation from several diaries mentions travellers becoming fascinated by mirages. Heat rising from the prairie occasionally created shimmering illusions that resembled lakes or distant settlements, only to vanish as people approached. Imagine spending hours walking toward what appears to be water, only for the entire lake to dissolve into sunlight. The West sometimes feels like a magician performing tricks with geography. Around midday, heat settles heavily across the trail. Hats become precious possessions. Shade becomes valuable currency. You find yourself appreciating every passing breeze. The wagon canvas provides occasional shelter, though not enough to transform the afternoon into comfort. The journey remains manageable, but it is never effortless. You stop briefly for lunch. People eat while sitting on wagon tongues, overturned buckets, or patches of grass. Conversations drift lazily through the warm air. Someone discusses land opportunities in Oregon. Another traveller recalls stories heard back in Missouri. A child proudly displays an unusual feather found during the morning march. Life on the trail consists of countless small moments stitched together by movement. The afternoon grows hotter. Dust thickens again. Sweat mixes with dirt. By now, appearances matter far less than practicality. Fashion has little influence on a wagon trail. Comfort becomes the dominant concern. You begin recognizing familiar faces among the travellers, the nervous wheel inspector, the elderly couple, the children who seem endlessly energetic. Communities form naturally when people share the same road. A question that continues to interest historians concerns how social bonds evolved during migration. Some researchers believe wagon trains created unusually strong relationships because participants depended heavily on one another in unfamiliar environments. Watching the group interact, that conclusion feels entirely plausible. Trust develops quickly when isolation surrounds you. The prairie offers plenty of beauty. It also offers reminders of vulnerability. A broken wagon, a lost animal, an illness. Problems that might be minor elsewhere can become serious out here. That awareness quietly influences behaviour. People help one another because cooperation increases everyone's chances. As afternoon slowly drifts toward evening, clouds begin gathering along the horizon. Nothing threatening, just enough to break the endless blue. Their shadows slide across the grasslands. The sight creates movement within a landscape that often appears motionless. You walk beside the wagon listening to familiar sounds. Wood creaking, leather straps shifting, metal hardware rattling softly. Only a few days ago these noises felt unusual. Now they feel comforting. Human beings adapt remarkably fast. What seemed strange becomes routine. What seemed impossible becomes manageable. The prairie continues unfolding mile after mile. Some travellers sing quietly while walking. Others remain lost in thought. Many simply focus on the next step, and then the next, and the next. Perhaps that is how enormous journeys are accomplished, not through grand acts of heroism, through repetition, thousands upon thousands of ordinary steps. Toward evening, the wagon train finally halts. The relief spreads visibly through the group. People stretch sore muscles. Animals are watered. Camp takes shape almost automatically. Each person knows the routine now. Tasks that seemed unfamiliar during the first days are becoming second nature. A delightful account preserved in one emigrant journal describes evening entertainment involving improvised dances performed on the open prairie. Despite exhaustion, travellers occasionally created moments of celebration simply because maintaining morale mattered. Human beings rarely abandon joy completely, even in difficult circumstances, especially in difficult circumstances. As darkness settles, campfires glow across the landscape. The scent of cooking drifts through the cooling air. Above, the stars appear once more, brilliant, sharp, endless. You sit beside the flames eating supper. Dust still coats your boots. Your legs feel tired. Your shoulders ache slightly. Yet something else has changed. The trail no longer feels like an abstract challenge waiting somewhere ahead. It has become daily life, a life measured in sunrises, wagon wheels, prairie grass, and campfires. The first snow remains a distant concern. Autumn remains somewhere beyond the horizon. For now, summer still rules the plains. And tomorrow, when dawn returns, you will rise with the others, brush the dust from your clothes, and continue following the long road west beneath that enormous sky. As the days continue slipping by, something remarkable begins happening each evening. The trail slows, the oxen stop, the dust settles, and for a few precious hours, the prairie transforms from a road into a neighbourhood. Throughout the day, survival and progress dominate attention. People focus on miles, animals, equipment, and weather. But once camp is established and immediate tasks are completed, another side of trail life emerges. The human side, the social side, the surprisingly cozy side. You arrive at camp near sunset. The western sky glows with deep shades of orange and gold. Long shadows stretch across the grasslands. A cooling breeze moves through the prairie, carrying away the heat accumulated throughout the afternoon. For the first time all day, nobody needs to keep walking. The relief feels tangible. A commonly recognized feature of wagon train life was the importance of evening camps. These gatherings provided opportunities for rest, cooking, social interaction, planning, and recovery after long days of travel. You quickly understand why people looked forward to them. The moment camp begins forming, activity spreads in every direction. Animals are unharnessed, water is fetched, Cooking fires appear. Children suddenly discover reserves of energy that adults cannot quite comprehend. Meanwhile, weary parents wonder whether young people possess secret batteries hidden somewhere under their clothing. You help gather fuel. Depending on the landscape, this task can be easier or harder than expected. On some stretches of prairie, wood remains scarce. Travellers often rely on whatever fuel they can find. The smell of smoke soon drifts through camp. Within minutes, dozens of small fires flicker across the grasslands. The sight is unexpectedly beautiful. Tiny circles of warmth scattered beneath an immense sky. Supper preparations begin. The scent of bacon mingles with coffee. Bread warms near the coals. Beans simmer quietly in iron pots. Nobody mistakes these meals for luxury cuisine. Yet after walking all day, simple food acquires extraordinary appeal. You sit near one fire watching a woman stir a pot while children wait impatiently nearby. The aroma alone seems capable of restoring morale. A fascinating detail from emigrant journals describes how eagerly travellers anticipated fresh food whenever opportunities arose. Wild berries, occasional game, or newly baked treats could generate excitement completely disproportionate to their size. Context changes everything. A single fresh apple on the trail might feel more exciting than an entire banquet back home. As darkness approaches, conversations begin flowing more freely. People discuss the day's events. Someone reports seeing unusual wildlife. Another describes a difficult section of road. A third shares rumours about conditions farther west. Information spreads through campfire conversations much the way news spreads through modern social media, only slower, and usually with more coffee. You notice how quickly friendships develop under these conditions. The elderly couple you first saw near the Missouri River now shares stories with younger families. Children drift between campsites collecting new friends. Neighbours exchange advice. Strangers gradually become companions. Many observers of westward migration have noted the strength of relationships formed during long journeys. Living, working, and travelling together created bonds that sometimes lasted decades after the trail ended. It is not difficult to see why. Shared challenges often create powerful connections. The evening deepens. Stars emerge overhead. Without artificial lighting, the night sky becomes almost overwhelming. Thousands upon thousands of points of light fill the darkness. The Milky Way stretches across the heavens like a pale river. You find yourself staring upward longer than intended. Many emigrants commented on the extraordinary brilliance of prairie night skies. For travellers accustomed to towns and settlements, the display could be unforgettable. Nearby, someone begins singing softly. The voice drifts through the cool air. Soon another joins, then another. Nothing formal, nothing rehearsed, just tired people finding comfort in familiar melodies. Music travels surprisingly well across open country. The notes seem to float over the grass. A particularly charming story survives from one wagon train involving a traveller who carried a violin across much of the journey. Evening performances reportedly became popular events that helped lift spirits during difficult stretches. It is easy to imagine the scene. A campfire, a dark prairie, music rising into the night. For a moment, the hardships of the trail fade into the background. Not disappear, just soften. You settle near the fire while sparks drift upward. The flames crackle gently. Someone tells a humorous story about an overly ambitious mule. Laughter spreads through the group. The sound feels surprisingly comforting. There is something reassuring about hearing people laugh in a place so vast and unfamiliar. The prairie may be enormous. Human warmth remains stubbornly persistent. Meanwhile, practical matters continue beneath the social atmosphere. Tomorrow's route is discussed. Water sources are considered. Weather observations are exchanged. Even relaxation contains elements of preparation. Out here, planning never completely stops. A subject that continues attracting scholarly interest involves the emotional experience of migration. Researchers still discuss the extent to which community life reduced feelings of isolation during the journey, versus how often emigrants felt lonely despite travelling among large groups. The answer likely varied. Human emotions rarely follow a single pattern. Some travellers probably thrived socially. Others may have felt homesick even while surrounded by companions. You think briefly about home. The thought arrives unexpectedly. Perhaps it is the campfire. Perhaps it is the familiar smell of cooking. Perhaps it is simply the quiet. Certain moments invite reflection. The trail constantly pushes you forward physically. The evenings occasionally pull your thoughts backward. You wonder what friends back east might be doing at this exact moment. You wonder whether they imagine your journey accurately. Probably not. Even you could not have imagined it accurately before leaving. The prairie teaches lessons that descriptions cannot fully capture. The scale, the dust, the silence, the stars. These things must be experienced. As the night grows later, conversations gradually fade. Children fall asleep first, then adults begin retiring to wagons, blankets, or makeshift beds. The camp quiets. Only a few voices remain. The fires burn lower. The air cools noticeably. You wrap yourself in a blanket and listen to distant sounds. An ox shifting its weight, a faint breeze moving through the grass. The occasional crackle of dying embers. The atmosphere feels peaceful. Not because danger has vanished. Not because challenges no longer exist. But because, for a few hours, movement has stopped. The road can wait until morning. The miles can wait until morning. The horizon can wait until morning. Tonight belongs to campfires and conversation, to music and stories, to simple meals and shared laughter, to the small comforts that make enormous journeys bearable. You close your eyes while the last traces of firelight flicker across the prairie. Somewhere beyond the darkness lies the long road west. But for now, beneath a sky crowded with stars, the wagon train rests, and tomorrow, after another sunrise, the wheels will begin turning once more. Morning arrives with a familiar routine. A fire is coaxed back to life. Coffee begins brewing. Blankets are folded. Oxen are gathered. The wagon train prepares to move once more. Yet today, another concern quietly rises above many others. Water. Not the romantic sort of water found in paintings. Not sparkling mountain streams flowing through storybooks. Just ordinary drinking water. The kind that suddenly becomes the most important thing in the world when you are far from dependable wells and comfortable towns. You finish a simple breakfast while watching several travellers fill containers from a nearby source. The process seems straightforward. Appear, collect water, continue west. But the trail quickly teaches that nothing involving water is ever quite that simple. A firmly established reality of overland migration was that access to safe water shaped daily decisions. Campsites, travel schedules, and routes often depended heavily on where reliable water could be found. Without water, everything else becomes secondary. The animals need it, the people need it. Cooking requires it, cleaning requires it. Even a short interruption creates problems. The wagon train begins moving under a bright morning sky. The prairie stretches endlessly around you. At first, water seems abundant. Streams occasionally cross the route. Small creeks appear unexpectedly. The temptation is to assume the situation will remain easy. Experienced travellers know better. Conditions change quickly. One source may be clear and refreshing. The next may be muddy and questionable. You walk beside the wagon while listening to conversations about rivers farther ahead. Everyone seems interested. Everyone pays attention. Unlike gossip, water information has immediate practical value. A reliable stream can improve an entire day. A poor source can create anxiety that lingers long after camp is established. As the morning progresses, the sun climbs steadily higher. The air grows warmer. Your canteen becomes increasingly important. You take careful sips. Not too much, not too little. The balance matters. Out here, even ordinary habits require thought. One traveller points toward a distant ribbon of trees. The observation immediately attracts attention. Trees often suggest water, not always, but often enough to inspire hope. The prairie possesses its own clues. Experienced eyes learn to read them. Vegetation, animal tracks, terrain, subtle signs that indicate where water might be hiding. A curious detail preserved in some emigrant writings describes how newcomers occasionally celebrated too early when spotting distant water. What appeared promising from miles away sometimes turned out to be shallow, muddy, or unsuitable once reached. The West occasionally enjoys testing expectations. You continue walking. The heat intensifies. Dust rises behind the wagons. Sweat gathers beneath hats and collars. The thought of cool water becomes surprisingly attractive. It occupies more mental space than you might expect. By midday, the wagon train stops near a creek. The relief is immediate. Animals drink eagerly. People refill containers. Faces brighten. The simple presence of fresh water changes the mood of an entire camp. You kneel near the bank and listen. The sound feels soothing, gentle, steady. After hours of wagon wheels and prairie wind, running water almost seems musical. Nearby, children splash enthusiastically. Adults attempt to maintain order. The children largely ignore these efforts. Some things never change. Lunch follows. People gather in whatever shade they can find. Conversations revolve around familiar topics. Road conditions. Animal health. Distance travelled. Yet water remains central. Everyone knows its importance. Everyone respects it. Researchers continue examining how emigrants evaluated water quality during westward migration. There remains a discussion about how much travellers understood regarding contamination versus how heavily they relied upon appearance, taste, and local experience. Modern knowledge didn't yet exist. Practical observation filled the gap, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. The afternoon brings another stretch of travel. The landscape rolls gently beneath an enormous sky. Clouds drift overhead. Their shadows move across the grasslands like slow ships crossing a green sea. You notice how often people scan the horizon, partly from curiosity or as partly from habit. The trail encourages constant observation. Every distant feature might matter: a stream, a campsite, a landmark, an opportunity. The road west rewards attention. Several hours later, you encounter a broader waterway, not a major river, not yet, but large enough to inspire discussion. Crossings always attract interest. Water represents both necessity and obstacle. The same river that provides life can also delay progress. That dual nature becomes increasingly obvious as the journey unfolds. You watch wagon leaders study the banks, the current, the depth. No decision is rushed. Patience often proves wiser than confidence. An especially memorable anecdote from trail history involves travellers who occasionally named favourite watering spots and campsites. Certain locations earned affectionate nicknames after repeatedly providing welcome relief from heat and thirst. Human beings develop attachment surprisingly quickly, even to temporary places, perhaps especially to temporary places. The afternoon gradually softens. Sunlight becomes less intense. The air cools slightly. People seem more relaxed. Water containers are full. The animals appear content. For the moment, one major concern has been addressed, not permanently, just temporarily. The trail operates that way. Problems rarely disappear forever. They simply take turns demanding attention. Toward evening, the wagon train selects a campsite near a dependable source. Approval spreads through the group. Nobody says much about it. They do not need to. Good water speaks for itself. Camp forms with practiced efficiency. Fires appear. Cooking begins. The familiar evening routine unfolds once again, yet tonight carries a subtle difference. The presence of nearby water changes the atmosphere. People wash faces. Clothing receives attention. Children play near the banks. The simple opportunity to clean away some dust feels luxurious. Back home, such comforts might pass unnoticed. On the trail, they feel extraordinary. You sit near the water's edge watching sunset colours reflect across the surface. Orange becomes gold. Gold becomes pink. The creek mirrors the sky above. For several minutes, the entire landscape seems to glow. Moments like this rarely appear in statistics. They rarely dominate history books. Yet they mattered. The trail was not merely hardship. It was also beauty, relief, gratitude, small victories. A dependable stream after a hot day qualifies as one of those victories. As darkness arrives, campfire light dances across the water. Voices drift through the evening air. The creek continues flowing quietly beside the camp, unconcerned with migration, unconcerned with schedules, simply moving forward. In a way, it resembles the wagon train itself. Steady, persistent, always heading onward. You settle beside the fire and listen to the sounds around you. Crackling wood, gentle conversation, flowing water. The combination creates a kind of prairie lullaby. Tomorrow the search for water will begin again. Tomorrow new streams, crossings, and uncertainties await. But tonight, at least, thirst is satisfied. The animals are watered, the camp is comfortable, and beneath the vast western sky, the journey continues one creek, one river, and one careful sip at a time. The trail has a peculiar way of turning strangers into neighbours. Not immediately. Not on the first morning beside the Missouri River. Trust takes time. Shared experiences take time. Walking hundreds of miles together, however, provides plenty of both. By now, familiar faces have become part of your daily landscape. You recognise people before they speak. You know which wagon belongs to which family. You know who rises first in the morning and who always seems to be searching for misplaced items. You know who tells the longest stories around the campfire. And you definitely know which child has somehow acquired a collection of unusual rocks from every campsite so far. Life on the trail is becoming more than movement. It is becoming community. A well-known feature of many wagon trains was the development of informal social networks. Travellers frequently relied upon one another for assistance, advice, labour, companionship, and emotional support during the long journey west. The importance of these relationships becomes increasingly obvious with each passing day. This morning begins with a small example. A wagon wheel requires attention. Nothing catastrophic, nothing dramatic, just a minor problem that needs solving. Within minutes, several people gather nearby. Suggestions appear, tools appear, opinions appear in remarkable abundance. You quickly discover that practical advice travels faster than wagons. Soon the issue is resolved. The wheel survives. The group moves on. The event lasts perhaps half an hour, yet it illustrates something important. Nobody crosses a continent entirely alone. Even the most independent traveller occasionally depends upon others. The prairie encourages cooperation, not because people become saints, because cooperation works. As the wagon train moves westward, conversations drift naturally between travellers. Some discuss farming, others discuss politics, many discuss weather. Humanity has spent thousands of years talking about weather, and apparently the Oregon Trail sees no reason to interrupt the tradition. You walk beside the wagon while listening to two men debate cloud formations with great seriousness. Neither possesses formal meteorological training. Both speak with complete confidence. The discussion continues for nearly an hour. A delightful detail preserved in several trail accounts describes travellers inventing nicknames for one another. These informal labels often reflected habits, personalities, memorable incidents, or recurring jokes within the wagon train. It is easy to imagine. After all, every group develops its own culture, its own humour, its own stories. Shared experiences create shared language. Around midday, the wagon train pauses near a pleasant stretch of prairie. Lunch preparations begin. Children immediately transform the break into an opportunity for games. Adults focus on food. This difference appears remarkably consistent across generations. You sit beneath the shade of a wagon while nearby families share meals. The atmosphere feels comfortable, familiar. The social awkwardness that marked the early days has largely disappeared. People know one another now, not completely, but enough. A widow travelling with relatives receives help repairing a damaged container. A farmer shares spare supplies with a neighbouring family. Someone passes round fresh biscuits. Small acts accumulate. They create a sense of belonging. The trail itself remains challenging. The people around you make it easier. The afternoon unfolds beneath a brilliant blue sky. Grass waves gently in the wind. The wagon train continues forward. You notice how often travellers walk together rather than alone. Companionship helps shorten long miles. Stories pass the time. Questions pass the time. Friendly arguments pass the time. Anything helps. The prairie may be beautiful, but it is also very, very large. Human conversation offers a useful counterbalance. Researchers continue exploring how social dynamics influence success on the trail. Some historians suggest that cohesive wagon trains often handle challenges more effectively than groups struggling with internal disagreements. The idea seems sensible. A community that works together possesses advantages, especially in unfamiliar environments. Not every interaction is positive. Of course, people remain people. Disagreements occur, opinions clash, personalities occasionally collide. One traveller may prefer an early departure, another prefers a slower pace. One family values caution, another favours speed. Differences emerge naturally. Yet most groups understand a simple reality. The journey is difficult enough without unnecessary conflict. Practical necessity encourages compromise. Late in the afternoon, you overhear a discussion about destinations. The conversation reminds you that not everyone shares identical goals. Some travellers intend to reach Oregon, others consider California. Few remain uncertain. Plans evolve, circumstances change. The West offers possibilities broad enough to accommodate many ambitions. One particularly interesting anecdote comes from emigrant recollections describing trail marriages. Although rare, romances occasionally developed during westward migration, transforming long journeys into unexpected beginnings. Imagine explaining that story years later. You set out to cross a continent. You returned with a spouse. History enjoys surprises. As evening approaches, the wagon train reaches a campsite selected for both grass and water. Approval spreads quietly through the group. Everyone appreciates a good campsite. Some things require no explanation. Camp forms efficiently. Fires appear. Cooking begins. The familiar evening transformation unfolds once again. The road disappears. The neighbourhood returns. Tonight, several travellers gather around one particularly large fire. Stories begin flowing almost immediately. Some are true. Most are mostly true. A few have clearly improved with repetition. That is the traditional fate of good stories. You listen while an older traveller describes experiences from years earlier on the frontier. Children sit nearby with wide eyes. Adults smile knowingly. The tale becomes slightly more dramatic each time it is told. Nobody seems to mind. Storytelling serves purposes beyond accuracy. It entertains. It connects. It preserves memories. A continuing topic among researchers involves how emigrants maintained morale during long journeys. Some scholars emphasize the importance of shared rituals such as storytelling, music, religious gatherings, and communal meals. Watching tonight's campfire gathering, that perspective feels persuasive. Humans require more than food and shelter. They require meaning, connection, a sense that they belong somewhere, even if that somewhere moves every day. The stars emerge overhead. The firelight flickers across familiar faces. You realize that the wagon train now feels less like a collection of strangers and more like a temporary village, a travelling village, one carried west by determination, oxen and countless turning wheels. The people around you remain imperfect. They worry. They argue. They make mistakes. Yet they also help, encourage, share. And in a landscape vast enough to make any individual feel small, those qualities matter. The fire burns lower. Conversations soften. Children drift towards sleep. The prairie night grows calm once more. Tomorrow new miles await. New dust. New horizons. But also familiar faces walking beside you. And sometimes, on a journey as long as the Oregon Trail, that familiarity becomes one of the most valuable supplies anyone carries west. The prairie begins changing before you fully realize it. At first, the transformation is subtle, a distant shape on the horizon, a darker patch moving through the grass. An unusual excitement spreading through the wagon train. People point. Conversations pause. Children climb onto wagons for a better view. Even the adults who normally pretend to be calm suddenly become very interested. Then you see them. Buffalo. Not one or two animals grazing peacefully. Not a small herd. An entire moving world. The dark shapes stretch across the plains in astonishing numbers. From a distance, they almost resemble storm clouds resting upon the earth. As you continue walking, the scale becomes clearer, and then larger still. One of the most firmly established facts about the Great Plains is that enormous buffalo herds once roamed these grasslands in numbers difficult for modern people to imagine. 19th century travellers frequently described encounters with herds extending for miles across the landscape. You stop walking for a moment. So do many others. The sight commands attention. Thousands of animals move through the grass. Some graze, some rest. Some wander slowly beneath the endless sky. The prairie suddenly feels less empty. Much less empty. The animals belong here in a way that no wagon train ever can. They move with confidence, with familiarity, with complete indifference to human schedules. You watch a massive bull lift its head. The creature appears powerful enough to challenge the landscape itself. Its broad shoulders catch the sunlight. Its dark silhouette stands against the horizon. Nearby, children react exactly as children have always reacted to remarkable sights. With excitement, questions begin immediately. How many are there? How large are they? Can they outrun horses? Do they ever stop moving? The adults provide answers of varying accuracy. Confidence remains abundant. Precision somewhat less so. An amusing detail found in emigrant recollections involves travellers routinely underestimating buffalo numbers. Journal writers often attempted descriptions, only to admit that the herds exceeded anything they had previously experienced. Words occasionally struggle against reality. This is one of those moments. The wagon train continues forward, gradually, carefully. No one wishes to disturb the animals unnecessarily. Buffalo can appear calm. They can also weigh close to a ton. That combination deserves respect. The morning unfolds beneath a bright sky. The prairie seems transformed by the presence of wildlife. Birds follow the herds. Dust rises from distant movement. The grass itself appears animated. Life exists everywhere. You realize that many Eastern travelers arrived expecting wilderness to mean emptiness. The Great Plains challenge that assumption. This landscape teems with activity. You simply need patience to notice it. Around midday, the wagon train pauses. Lunch is served beneath the watchful gaze of distant buffalo. Conversations revolve almost entirely around the animals. For once, nobody seems interested in discussing wagon wheels. A refreshing change. You sit near a small group of travellers sharing observations. One insists today's herd is the largest ever seen. Another claims an even larger one appeared several years earlier. The debate remains unresolved. Some questions never receive definitive answers. A noteworthy historical reality is that buffalo played an important role in the lives of many indigenous communities across the plains. The animals provided food, clothing materials, tools, shelter resources, and cultural significance long before emigrant wagons began crossing the region. As you watch the herds moving through the grasslands, it becomes easier to appreciate that connection. The animals are not simply scenery. They are part of a larger world already thriving here. The afternoon brings closer encounters. Nothing dangerous, just closer. The wagon train passes near a section of grazing animals. The sounds become clearer. Heavy breathing, low grunts, hooves shifting through the grass. The smell arrives as well. Strong, earthy, distinctive. Nature rarely worries about elegance. A little-known observation recorded by some travellers describes how buffalo trails occasionally influenced human travel routes. The animals often selected practical paths through the terrain, and people sometimes benefited from their choices. Even here, the buffalo possess experience. They understand the land better than newcomers. The sky remains clear. Sunlight glitters across the prairie. You walk quietly, absorbing the scene. There is something oddly calming about watching animals completely unconcerned with human ambitions. The buffalo are not thinking about Oregon. They are not calculating mileage. They are not worrying about autumn. They are simply living. Perhaps there is a lesson hidden somewhere in that simplicity. As the afternoon progresses, hunting becomes a topic of conversation. Not everyone participates. Not everyone approves. Yet the possibility exists. Fresh meat holds obvious appeal after weeks of trail food. Still, successful hunting requires time, skill, and caution. The buffalo are impressive animals. They are not resources waiting politely beside the road. They are wild creatures capable of defending themselves. Academic discussion continues regarding how emigrants perceived buffalo populations compared with the actual ecological conditions of the plains. Some researchers suggest that the sheer abundance witnessed by travellers created assumptions about permanence that later generations would learn were tragically mistaken. Standing here, that future feels impossible to imagine. The herds seem endless, timeless, part of the landscape itself. Toward evening, the buffalo gradually fade into the distance. The wagon train continues onward. The animals continue their own journeys. For a while, both groups share the same horizon. Then the distance grows. Camp is established near a small water source. The familiar routine resumes. Fires, cooking, conversation. Yet tonight carries a different energy. The buffalo dominate every discussion. Stories grow larger with each retelling. The herd becomes bigger. The animals become faster. The details become slightly more dramatic. Human memory occasionally enjoys embellishment, especially around campfires. You sit beside the flames while darkness settles across the prairie. Somewhere beyond the reach of firelight, the buffalo still move through the grasslands, invisible now, but present. The thought feels strangely comforting. The prairie no longer seems like an endless empty expanse. It feels inhabited, alive, connected. The stars appear overhead. The fire crackles softly. Voices drift through the night air. Tomorrow the wagon train will continue west. New landscapes await. New challenges await. But today has provided something memorable. Not a river crossing, not a storm, not a mechanical problem. Just the simple wonder of witnessing one of the great wildlife spectacles of the 19th century. And as you settle beneath the vast prairie sky, the image remains vivid in your mind. Thousands of dark shapes moving through waves of grass beneath the summer sun. The storm announces itself long before the first drop of rain falls. At dawn, the prairie feels different, not dramatically different, just slightly unsettled. The air seems heavier. The wind shifts direction more often than usual. Even the light appears altered, softened beneath a thin layer of distant cloud. You notice travellers glancing upward more frequently. The sky has become a topic of conversation again. Out here, the weather is never merely background scenery. It is a participant in the journey, sometimes a helpful participant, sometimes not. This morning, nobody is entirely certain which version has arrived. The wagon train moves steadily west. Grass ripples beneath strengthening gusts. Clouds gather along the horizon. At first they appear harmless, small, scattered, easy to ignore. By mid-morning, that confidence begins fading. A well-documented aspect of life on the Great Plains was the sudden arrival of powerful weather systems. Travellers often encountered thunderstorms capable of transforming an ordinary day into a memorable ordeal within a remarkably short period. You continue walking beside the wagon. The sky darkens incrementally, not enough to create alarm, enough to attract attention. The prairie possesses an unusual relationship with weather. Nothing blocks your view, no mountains, few forests, no city skylines. You can watch storms forming from astonishing distances. The experience is both fascinating and slightly unsettling. It feels as though nature is giving you advance notice. The problem is that advance notice does not necessarily provide an escape. By noon, the clouds have expanded considerably. Their edges rise higher into the atmosphere. Shadows sweep across the grasslands. The wind grows stronger. Canvas covers flutter. Hats require firmer handling. Conversations become shorter. People focus on practical matters. A particularly colourful observation from trail journals described approaching prairie storms as moving fortresses in the sky. Several emigrants struggled to find comparisons large enough to capture the immense scale of the cloud formations they witnessed. Standing beneath one now, you understand the challenge. The storm appears enormous. The wagon train appears small. That contrast becomes difficult to ignore. Lunch occurs quickly. Nobody lingers. Dark clouds continue advancing. The horizon ahead resembles charcoal painting. Deep greys blend into darker shades. Occasional flashes flicker within the distant cloud banks. The prairie falls strangely quiet. Birdsong diminishes. Even conversations soften. Many people recognize the signs. The storm is no longer a possibility. It is coming. The first thunder arrives shortly afterward. Not a sharp crack. A deep rolling sound. It travels across the plains with remarkable authority. The ground itself seems to listen. Children stop talking. Adults exchange glances. Nobody panics. Thunderstorms are not unusual. Still, respect feels appropriate. You continue moving. The wagon train maintains its pace. There is little alternative. The clouds continue building overhead. The sunlight fades. The world takes on muted colours. Grass becomes darker. Shadows become broader. The entire landscape appears transformed. An interesting anecdote recorded by one traveller tells of oxen reacting to approaching storms before people fully recognise the danger. According to the account, the animals displayed unusual restlessness hours before severe weather arrived. Whether coincidence or observation, such stories appear often enough to attract attention. Animals notice things, sometimes sooner than humans. The wind arrives next. A strong gust sweeps across the prairie, then another. Dust rises. Loose clothing flutters wildly. The wagon covers strain against their fastenings. The air smells different now. Cooler, sharper, carrying that distinctive scent which often precedes rain. You know the smell. Even centuries later, people recognize it instantly. The promise of a storm. The first raindrops appear suddenly, large, scattered, heavy enough to leave dark marks in the dust. For a moment, they seem almost refreshing. The heat of recent days has been considerable. Rain offers relief. Then the real downpour begins. The prairie disappears behind curtains of water. Visibility shrinks dramatically. Dust becomes mud. Dry grass becomes slick. The sound alone is astonishing. Rain strikes canvas. Rain strikes wagons. Rain strikes earth. The entire landscape seems filled with movement. Travel becomes more difficult immediately. Wheels sink deeper. Footing becomes uncertain. Clothing grows heavier. Yet the wagon train continues. Slowly. Patiently. There is no dramatic charge against the storm. Only persistence. One step. Then another. Then another. Historical researchers continue examining how weather disruptions influence travel schedules across different years and routes. Evidence suggests that storms could create significant delays, although the severity varied greatly depending upon local conditions and timing. Today, the consequences remain manageable. Unpleasant, but manageable. Thunder grows louder. Lightning flashes across the dark sky. For brief moments, the prairie glows silver. Then darkness returns. The spectacle is magnificent, and from a safe distance, perhaps even enjoyable. Standing directly beneath it is a different experience. You lower your head against the rain and keep moving. The oxen deserve admiration. They continue forward with remarkable determination. Water streams from their hides. Mud splashes around their hooves. Still they pull. Still they advance. A lesser appreciated fact about the Oregon Trail is how dependent emigrants were upon animal endurance. Human plans often succeeded or failed according to the strength and reliability of the creatures pulling the wagons. The storm eventually begins weakening. Not immediately, gradually as the rain softens, thunder becomes less frequent. The clouds slowly drift eastward. Sunlight cautiously returns. The prairie emerges once again, changed. The dust is gone, at least temporarily. The grass glistens with moisture. Small puddles reflect patches of blue sky. Everything smells clean, fresh, renewed. The wagon train finally reaches camp later than usual. The atmosphere differs from most evenings. People are damp, tired, mud-stained, yet oddly cheerful. There is something satisfying about enduring a challenge together. Stories begin immediately. Each person experienced the storm slightly differently. Each version grows more dramatic during retelling. That process appears universal across human history. Campfires require extra effort tonight. Dry fuel becomes valuable. When flames finally appear, they attract grateful attention. Warmth feels especially welcome. You sit beside the fire, listening to the familiar sounds of evening. Crackling wood, quiet conversation, occasional laughter. The storm has passed. The prairie is calm once more. Tomorrow the ground may still be soft. The wheels may still struggle. But tonight, beneath clearing skies and newly washed stars, the wagon train rests. The first snow remains far away, yet the weather has delivered an important reminder. Winter is not the only force capable of challenging travellers on the Oregon Trail. The plains possess plenty of surprises long before cold weather ever arrives. The morning after the storm feels unusually fresh. The prairie seems to have taken a long bath overnight. Dust has vanished. The grass sparkles with lingering moisture. The air smells clean and cool. Even the sunlight appears sharper. You step from camp and immediately notice another difference. The children are already awake. Of course they are. After weeks on the trail, one mystery remains unsolved. How do children possess so much energy? Adults rise carefully, stretching stiff muscles and rubbing tired eyes. Children emerge ready to investigate the entire continent before breakfast. Some things transcend history. You watch several youngsters chasing one another through damp grass while parents prepare the morning meal. Their laughter drifts across the campsite. The sound feels cheerful against the backdrop of wagon wheels and campfire smoke. A frequently overlooked reality of the Oregon Trail is that thousands of children made the journey west alongside adults. Many trail diaries and letters reveal how young people experience migration differently, often adapting to its routines with surprising speed. For children, the trail is not always a burden. Sometimes it is an adventure. Sometimes it is a playground stretching beyond the horizon. Sometimes it is both before lunchtime. As the wagon train begins moving, you notice the younger travellers settling into their own routines. Some walk beside family members, others ride temporarily when space permits. A few seem determined to collect treasures from every mile of prairie. Interesting stones, unusual feathers, curiously shaped sticks. The West provides endless opportunities for discovery. Adults see distance. Children often see details. One little girl proudly carries a small collection of flowers gathered near yesterday's campsite. A boy carefully examines animal tracks along the route. Another spends nearly an hour pretending his walking stick is a famous explorer's staff. Imagination remains wonderfully durable. The prairie cannot wear it down. As the morning unfolds, you begin appreciating how much work children actually perform. They are not merely passengers. Many assist with livestock. Others gather fuel. Some help prepare meals. Older children frequently assume responsibilities that would surprise many modern observers. Life on the trail requires contributions from nearly everyone. Age changes the nature of those contributions. It rarely eliminates them entirely. A charming observation recorded in several emigrant journals describes children treating river crossings as major entertainment events. While adults worried about logistics and safety, many young travellers simply enjoyed the excitement of something unusual happening. Perspective shapes experience. The same event can produce anxiety in one person and delight in another. The wagon train continues westward beneath clear skies. The prairie stretches endlessly around you. Children seem remarkably resistant to boredom. They invent games, create competitions, turn ordinary activities into adventures. A simple race between two wagons can become the most important sporting event in North America for approximately 20 minutes. Then a butterfly appears. The championship is forgotten. Researchers continue discussing how migration affected childhood experiences during westward expansion. Some suggest that the trail accelerated maturity through responsibility, while others emphasize the persistence of play, curiosity, and imagination despite difficult conditions. Watching today's young travellers, both interpretations seem reasonable. Responsibility and wonder often coexist. One does not automatically eliminate the other. Around midday, the wagon train pauses, lunch preparations begin. Several children immediately transform the stop into an opportunity for exploration. Parents issue instructions. Children nod enthusiastically. The degree to which those instructions are followed varies considerably. You sit beneath the shade of a wagon and observe a group examining insects near the edge of camp. The discussion appears extremely serious. Scientific standards are somewhat flexible. Enthusiasm is not. Nearby, a young boy attempts to convince others that a particularly ordinary grasshopper possesses extraordinary powers. The presentation lacks evidence. The audience remains receptive. The afternoon brings more walking, more prairie, more horizon. Yet children continue finding novelty. Cloud formations become imaginary animals. Distant hills become castles. Interesting rocks become priceless treasures. Adults often focus on destination. Children often focus on the journey itself. There is wisdom in both approaches. An entertaining little-known story from trail recollections involves youngsters keeping unofficial pet animals gathered along the route. These arrangements rarely lasted long, usually because wild creatures had opinions about the matter. The children were disappointed. The animals were probably relieved. As the day progresses, you notice older children helping younger siblings. They carry supplies, share food, offer encouragement. Family life continues even while crossing a continent. The setting changes. The relationships remain. One historical constant throughout human migration is the importance of family cooperation. The Oregon Trail provides countless examples. Parents guide children. Children assist parents. Everyone adjusts together. The process is rarely perfect. It is often effective. The prairie rolls gently beneath the afternoon sun. The wagon train advances steadily. You overhear conversations about schools back east, about hopes for new farms, about futures still taking shape somewhere beyond the western horizon. For many families, children represent a significant reason for making the journey. Opportunity matters. Land matters. The future matters. And futures are often imagined through the next generation. An ongoing area of historical discussion concerns how accurately emigrants predicted the lives their children would eventually lead in the West. Evidence suggests that expectations varied widely, influenced by optimism, practicality, and personal experience. No one can truly see decades ahead. People try anyway. Toward evening, the wagon train reaches another campsite. The routine unfolds with familiar efficiency. Animals are tended, fires are lit, supper begins. Children who seem tireless throughout the day suddenly discover the concept of exhaustion. The transformation can occur with remarkable speed. One moment they are racing through camp, the next they are asleep before finishing a conversation. The stars emerge overhead. Campfire light flickers across the prairie. Tonight, several youngsters sit listening to stories told by older travellers. The audience appears captivated. Perhaps the stories are extraordinary. Perhaps children simply appreciate a good storyteller. Either explanation works. You watch the scene while eating supper. It feels comforting. The Oregon Trail contains uncertainty, hardship, risk. Yet it also contains ordinary family moments, lessons shared beside campfires, games played in the grass, laughter carried by the evening breeze. These moments rarely dominate historical narratives. They deserve attention nonetheless. Because life continues even during epic journeys, Children still play, parents still worry, families still gather round evening fires and beneath the vast western sky, while the wagon train inches steadily toward distant destinations. A generation grows up 1 mile, one campsite, and one prairie sunset at a time. The morning after the storm feels unusually fresh. The prairie seems to have taken a long bath overnight. Dust has vanished. The grass sparkles with lingering moisture. The air smells clean and cool. Even the sunlight appears sharper. You step from camp and immediately notice another difference. The children are already awake. Of course they are. After weeks on the trail, one mystery remains unsolved. How do children possess so much energy? Adults rise carefully, stretching stiff muscles and rubbing tired eyes. Children emerge ready to investigate the entire continent before breakfast. Some things transcend history. You watch several youngsters chasing one another through damp grass while parents prepare the morning meal. Their laughter drifts across the campsite. The sound feels cheerful against the backdrop of wagon wheels and campfire smoke. A frequently overlooked reality of the Oregon Trail is that thousands of children made the journey west alongside adults. Many trail diaries and letters reveal how young people experience migration differently, often adapting to its routines with surprising speed. For children, the trail is not always a burden. Sometimes it is an adventure. Sometimes it's a playground stretching beyond the horizon. Sometimes it is both before lunchtime. As the wagon train begins moving, you notice the younger travelers settling into their own routines. Some walk beside family members. Others ride temporarily when space permits. A few seem determined to collect treasures from every mile of prairie. Interesting stones, unusual feathers, curiously shaped sticks. The West provides endless opportunities for discovery. Adults see distance. Children often see details. One little girl proudly carries a small collection of flowers gathered near yesterday's campsite. A boy carefully examines animal tracks along the route. Another spends nearly an hour pretending his walking stick is a famous explorer's staff. Imagination remains wonderfully durable. The prairie cannot wear it down. As the morning unfolds, you begin appreciating how much work children actually perform. They are not merely passengers. Many assist with livestock. Others gather fuel. Some help prepare meals. Older children frequently assume responsibilities that would surprise many modern observers. Life on the trail requires contributions from nearly everyone. Age changes the nature of those contributions. It rarely eliminates them entirely. A charming observation recorded in several emigrant journals describes children treating river crossings as major entertainment events. While adults worried about logistics and safety, many young travelers simply enjoyed the excitement of something unusual happening. Perspective shapes experience. The same event can produce anxiety in one person and delight in another. The wagon train continues westward beneath clear skies. The prairie stretches endlessly around you. Children seem remarkably resistant to boredom. They invent games, create competitions, turn ordinary activities into adventures. A simple race between two wagons can become the most important sporting event in North America for approximately 20 minutes. Then a butterfly appears. The championship is forgotten. Researchers continue discussing how migration affected childhood experiences during westward expansion. Some suggest that the trail accelerated maturity through responsibility, while others emphasize the persistence of play, curiosity, and imagination despite difficult conditions. Watching today's young travelers, both interpretations seem reasonable. Responsibility and wonder often coexist. One does not automatically eliminate the other. Around midday, the wagon train pauses. Lunch preparations begin. Several children immediately transform the stop into an opportunity for exploration. Parents issue instructions. Children nod enthusiastically. The degree to which those instructions are followed varies considerably. You sit beneath the shade of a wagon and observe a group examining insects near the edge of camp. The discussion appears extremely serious. Scientific standards are somewhat flexible. Enthusiasm is not. Nearby, a young boy attempts to convince others that a particularly ordinary grasshopper possesses extraordinary powers. The presentation lacks evidence. The audience remains receptive. The afternoon brings more walking, more prairie, more horizon. Yet children continue finding novelty. Cloud formations become imaginary animals. Distant hills become castles. Interesting rocks become priceless treasures. Adults often focus on destination. Children often focus on the journey itself. There is wisdom in both approaches. An entertaining little-known story from Trail Recollections involves youngsters keeping unofficial pet animals gathered along the route. These arrangements rarely lasted long, usually because wild creatures had opinions about the matter. The children were disappointed. The animals were probably relieved. As the day progresses, you notice older children helping younger siblings. They carry supplies, share food, offer encouragement. Family life continues even while crossing a continent. The setting changes. The relationships remain. One historical constant throughout human migration is the importance of family cooperation. The Oregon Trail provides countless examples. Parents guide children. Children assist parents. Everyone adjusts together. The process is rarely perfect. It is often effective. The prairie rolls gently beneath the afternoon sun. The wagon train advances steadily. You overhear conversations about schools back east, about hopes for new farms, about futures still taking shape somewhere beyond the western horizon. For many families, children represent a significant reason for making the journey. Opportunity matters. Land matters. The future matters. And futures are often imagined through the next generation. An ongoing area of historical discussion concerns how accurately emigrants predicted the lives their children would eventually lead in the West. Evidence suggests that expectations varied widely, influenced by optimism, practicality, and personal experience. No one can truly see decades ahead. People try anyway. Toward evening, the wagon train reaches another campsite. The routine unfolds with familiar efficiency. Animals are tended. Fires are lit. Supper begins. Children who seem tireless throughout the day suddenly discover the concept of exhaustion. The transformation can occur with remarkable speed. One moment they are racing through camp, the next they are asleep before finishing a conversation. The stars emerge overhead. Campfire light flickers across the prairie. Tonight, several youngsters sit listening to stories told by older travelers. The audience appears captivated. Perhaps the stories are extraordinary. Perhaps children simply appreciate a good storyteller. Either explanation works. You watch the scene while eating supper. It feels comforting. The Oregon Trail contains uncertainty, hardship, risk. Yet it also contains ordinary family moments. Lessons shared beside campfires. Games played in the grass. Laughter carried by the evening breeze. These moments rarely dominate historical narratives. They deserve attention nonetheless. Because life continues even during epic journeys. Children still play, parents still worry, families still gather around evening fires, and beneath the vast western sky, while the wagon train inches steadily toward distant destinations, a generation grows up 1 mile, 1 campsite, and 1 prairie sunset at a time. The farther west you travel, the more your carefully prepared plans begin encountering reality. Reality, unfortunately, has a habit of ignoring packing lists. Back beside the Missouri River, supplies seemed abundant. Barrels were full. Toolboxes were organized. Food stores appeared reassuringly large. Many travellers looked at their wagons and felt prepared for almost anything. Several weeks later, perspectives begin changing. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. A sack feels lighter than before. A container empties faster than expected. A tool that seemed unnecessary suddenly becomes very important. The trail has begun its quiet audit of everyone's preparations. You wake beneath clear skies and help break camp. The familiar routine unfolds efficiently. Yet conversations reveal a subtle shift. People are thinking more carefully about supplies now. Not because disaster is looming, because experience is accumulating. An accepted historical observation is that emigrants regularly consumed or discarded large quantities of provisions during the journey. Food, equipment, clothing, and wagon components all experienced wear, loss, or unexpected depletion over time. The trail is constantly asking questions. Did you bring enough flour, enough spare parts, enough rope, enough patience? Some answers become apparent sooner than others. As the wagon train moves alongside the Platte corridor, you overhear a discussion about coffee. Specifically, how much remains. The conversation possesses an intensity usually reserved for military strategy. This is understandable. Coffee has become one of the emotional pillars supporting civilization. Its importance should not be underestimated. You smile as the debate continues. One traveller insists supplies will last comfortably. Another predicts shortages. A third recommends stricter rationing. Everyone contributes. No final conclusion emerges. The prairie absorbs the disagreement and remains silent. A delightful tidbit appears in several emigrant recollections involving treasured food items hidden away for special occasions. Some families carefully protected small luxuries such as dried fruit, candy, or preserves, saving them for celebrations, difficult days, or moments when morale needed encouragement. Even on a continent crossing, people still appreciate dessert, perhaps especially on a continent crossing. The morning passes peacefully. The landscape unfolds beneath a broad blue sky. The river glitters nearby. The wagon train maintains its steady rhythm, yet practical concerns never disappear entirely. You notice a man examining harness straps during a brief stop. Another traveller repairs a container. Someone else inventories supplies yet again. Preparation does not end after departure. It simply becomes ongoing maintenance. Life on the trail often resembles managing a small travelling household. A household that happens to be moving across North America. By midday, lunch is served beneath scattered cottonwoods. Shade feels wonderful. The air remains warm. People gather in small groups discussing familiar subjects: distance, weather, animals, supplies. The same topics return repeatedly because they matter repeatedly. One traveller proudly displays fresh meat obtained through hunting. Interest spreads immediately. Trail food can become predictable. Any variation attracts attention. The aroma alone generates admiration. A noteworthy feature of westward migration was the way hunting occasionally supplemented emigrant diets. Success varied widely depending on location, skill, opportunity, and simple luck. The key word is occasionally. The wagon train cannot depend upon hunting. It remains a bonus rather than a guarantee. The afternoon brings another reminder of preparation's limits. A wagon experiences mechanical trouble. Nothing catastrophic. Yet the repair requires time and effort. Tools emerge. Advice emerges. Spectators emerge as well. Human beings have always enjoyed observing repair work while offering suggestions. This tradition appears ancient and remarkably durable. You help where possible. Eventually the issue is resolved. The wagon continues. The journey resumes. Such interruptions have become part of trail life. Few days unfold exactly as planned. That reality no longer surprises anyone. A lesser-known anecdote from one emigrant diary tells of travellers trading unexpected items along the route. Spare clothing, tools, food, and household goods occasionally changed hands when circumstances altered priorities. The marketplace simply moved west with the people. Where humans gather, exchange follows. As afternoon sunlight stretches across the prairie, you notice another change. The wagon train feels more experienced now. Not expert. Experienced. There is a difference. Movements are more efficient. Camp routines are smoother. Problems inspire less panic. The group has learned. The learning process continues every day. A question that remains open among historians concerns how much trail success depended upon original preparation versus adaptation during the journey itself. Some researchers emphasize planning, while others highlight flexibility as the decisive factor. Watching the wagon train. Flexibility appears extremely valuable. No one can predict everything. The ability to adjust may matter just as much as the ability to prepare. Toward evening, several travellers discuss future supply opportunity farther west, forts, trading posts, possible resupply points. The conversation attracts considerable interest. The trail creates appreciation for resources that modern people often take for granted. A sack of flour, a replacement axle, a handful of nails. These items can suddenly seem enormously important. The western sky begins glowing with sunset colours. The wagon train reaches another campsite. Animals are watered. Fires are lit. The familiar transformation from travelling community to temporary village occurs once again. Tonight, the smell of cooking drifts across the camp. Beans simmer, bread warms, coffee brews. The aromas create a comforting atmosphere. Simple food, simple pleasures, yet they carry remarkable power. You sit beside the fire listening to nearby conversations. Some travellers discuss land they hope to claim. Others discuss relatives waiting farther west. Many discuss practical matters for tomorrow. Life continues balancing dreams and necessities. The destination remains important. The next meal remains important too. The stars appear overhead, bright and steady. The fire crackles softly. You glance toward the wagons. Each one still carries a carefully selected collection of possessions. Yet those collections have already begun changing. Food consumed, items repaired, objects traded. The trail reshapes everything it touches. People, plans, possessions, even expectations. Tomorrow will bring more opportunities to adapt, more chances to discover which supplies matter most, more reminders that preparation is valuable but never perfect. For now, however, the camp is quiet, the animals are fed, the fires are warm, and beneath the vast prairie sky, hundreds of travellers settle into sleep, carrying with them the comforting knowledge that another day of westward progress has been successfully completed. The prairie has never truly been empty. That realization arrives gradually. At first, many emigrants see only distance, grasslands, rivers, sky, buffalo, weather. Yet the farther west you travel, the clearer another truth becomes. People already live here. Many people, many nations, many communities. The Oregon Trail crosses landscapes with long histories that began long before the first wagon wheel rolled west from Missouri. This morning begins beneath a pale sunrise. A thin layer of mist lingers near the river. The air feels pleasantly cool. Camp awakens slowly. Coffee brews, animals stir. The familiar rhythm resumes, yet today carries a subtle sense of anticipation. Rumours have circulated for several days about possible encounters ahead. Nothing alarming, simply expectations. The trail serves as a meeting place as much as a migration route. An important historical reality is that emigrants travelling west frequently encountered indigenous peoples throughout the journey. The plains and Western Territories were home to numerous nations whose histories, trade networks, and communities long predated American overland migration. You begin walking as the wagon train moves forward. The prairie stretches beneath a clear blue sky. Conversations drift through the group. Some travellers appear curious, others appear uncertain. Many possess opinions shaped by stories heard back east. Not all of those stories are accurate. The frontier has always generated rumours. The truth is usually more complicated. By mid-morning, a small group appears in the distance. The sight spreads quickly through the wagon train. People notice. People watch. People speculate. The approaching figures move calmly, without urgency, without visible concern. The atmosphere remains cautious but peaceful. You observe from a respectful distance. The encounter unfolds through conversation, observation, and mutual curiosity. For many emigrants, moments like this represented their first direct interactions with indigenous people. First impressions carry weight. They also carry limitations. A memorable detail found in numerous trail accounts involves the fascination children often displayed during such encounters. While adults worried about expectations and assumptions, younger observers frequently focused on clothing, horses, tools, or simple curiosity about unfamiliar people. Children sometimes approach differences with refreshing simplicity. The meeting remains brief, respectful, practical. Trade occasionally occurs in situations like these. Information may be exchanged. News travels along many routes, not just wagon roads. The encounter eventually concludes. The groups continue their separate journeys. Yet the experience remains in your thoughts. The Oregon Trail is often remembered primarily as a story of westward migration. Standing here, that interpretation feels incomplete. It is also a story of intersections, different cultures meeting within shared landscapes, different experiences occupying the same horizon. The wagon train moves onward. The river glitters nearby. The prairie remains vast, but perhaps it feels slightly less empty than before. Around midday, travellers discuss the encounter over lunch. Opinions vary. Interpretations vary. Human beings rarely witness the same event in exactly the same way. One person focuses on trade, another remembers clothing, a third recalls specific conversations. Memory selects details according to its own mysterious logic. You sit quietly listening. The discussion reveals as much about the emigrants as it does about the people they encountered. Journeys do not merely expose travellers to new places, they expose them to new perspectives. The afternoon unfolds beneath warm sunshine. Clouds drift lazily overhead. The wagon train follows familiar tracks westward, yet your attention lingers on the broader history of these plains. Long before wagon trains, countless generations crossed this land. They hunted, traded, raised families, built relationships, learned the rhythms of rivers and seasons. The trail itself exists within a much older story. A lesser-known observation preserved in some emigrant diaries describes travellers receiving practical assistance from indigenous individuals regarding routes, river conditions, or local geography. Such interactions rarely fit neatly into simplified narratives, yet they formed part of daily life across many stretches of the trail. Reality tends to resist simplicity. The farther you travel, the more obvious that becomes. An area of continuing academic discussion involves how emigrants interpreted the societies they encountered across the plains. Historians continue examining the ways personal experience, cultural assumptions, and prior expectations shape travellers' observations. The evidence suggests considerable variation. Some emigrants recorded curiosity, others recorded misunderstanding, many recorded both. Human perception is rarely straightforward. The afternoon passes peacefully, Grass waves beneath a steady breeze, the wheels continue turning, the oxen continue pulling, yet the landscape now feels layered with additional meaning. You're not merely crossing empty territory, you're moving through a region already rich with history, relationships, and traditions. That awareness changes how the prairie appears. The horizon seems broader somehow, more connected. Later in the day, you notice signs of human activity beyond the wagon train itself. Tracks, old campsites, evidence that others have passed through recently. The trail may be famous today for emigrant traffic, but movement across these lands existed long before organised wagon trains. People have always travelled. The reasons differ. The movement remains. A particularly intriguing anecdote from trail recollections tells of emigrants becoming unexpectedly interested in learning local words and place names. Success varied considerably. Pronunciation often proved adventurous. Good intentions do not always guarantee linguistic excellence. Still, curiosity matters. Curiosity opens doors. The sun begins sinking lower. Golden light spreads across the plains. The wagon train searches for a suitable campsite. Soon the familiar evening routine begins. Animals are tended, fires are lit, supper cooks. The comforting smells of camp life return once again. Tonight's conversations frequently revisit the day's encounter, not because it was dramatic, because it was meaningful. Travel broadens understanding in small increments, rarely all at once. One conversation, one meeting, one observation at a time. You sit beside the fire while twilight deepens. The prairie grows quiet. Stars begin appearing overhead. The flames cast warm light across familiar faces. The wagon train continues west. Tomorrow it will continue west again. Yet, tonight, your thoughts linger on the people who know this land differently. The people whose histories are intertwined with these rivers, grasslands, and horizons. The Oregon Trail remains a migration route, but it is also a place where worlds meet, and beneath the vast evening sky, surrounded by the sounds of camp and the endless prairie beyond, that truth feels impossible to ignore. At first, you think the shapes on the horizon are clouds. They appear faint and blue in the distance, almost unreal, easy to mistake for tricks of light. The wagon train continues westward through familiar prairie country. Grass sways in the breeze. The river remains nearby. Everything feels comfortably recognizable. Then someone points. A second traveller notices. A third confirms it. The blue shapes are not clouds. They are mountains. Far away, very far away, yet unmistakable. The sight spreads through the wagon train with surprising speed. People stop to look. Conversations pause. Even experienced travellers linger for a moment. The mountains represent something important. Progress. The journey is entering a new chapter. The endless plains are no longer the only feature on the horizon. One widely acknowledged fact of the Oregon Trail is that emigrants gradually approach the Rocky Mountains after crossing the Great Plains, with distant peaks often becoming visible long before travellers reach them. You stare toward the western skyline. The mountains seem impossibly distant, yet their presence changes everything. For weeks, the horizon has felt abstract, a line separating earth from sky. Now it contains a destination, something tangible, something visible. The psychological effect is immediate. The west suddenly feels closer, not close, just closer. The wagon train moves forward beneath clear skies. The mountains remain faint but persistent. You glance toward them repeatedly throughout the morning. So does everyone else. They possess a magnetic quality, difficult to ignore. The prairie still dominates the landscape. The grasslands remain vast. The rivers remain broad, yet attention keeps drifting westward. The mountains have become the day's main attraction. A fascinating observation recorded in numerous emigrant journals describes how travellers frequently misjudged mountain distances. Peaks that appeared only a day's journey away sometimes required many additional days to reach. The West enjoys playing games with perspective. Apparently, it has been doing so for centuries. By midday, the peaks appear slightly clearer, not dramatically, just enough. Their outlines sharpen against the sky. You sit near the river during lunch while listening to conversations around you. The topic is nearly universal. Mountains. How high are they? How difficult will the crossings be? How much farther remains? Speculation flourishes. Precise answers remain scarce. Human beings have always enjoyed discussing future challenges before actually encountering them. Sometimes preparation helps. Sometimes it merely provides entertainment. The afternoon unfolds beneath warm sunshine. The wagon train advances steadily. The mountains linger ahead like silent observers. They seem calm, patient, unmoved by human schedules. The prairie, meanwhile, continues offering its familiar comforts. Open space, wide skies, long views. Soon enough, those characteristics will begin changing. The thought creates mixed feelings. Many travellers have grown accustomed to the plains. The landscape no longer feels strange. It feels familiar, perhaps even comforting. Yet the mountains inspire excitement too. They represent movement, achievement, proof that the journey is progressing. An intriguing little-known anecdote from trail recollections involves emigrants attempting to estimate mountain heights through increasingly imaginative methods. The results were often creative rather than accurate. Without modern instruments, confidence frequently filled the gap. The mountain peaks remained entirely unimpressed. As afternoon drifts onward, the terrain begins changing subtly. Nothing dramatic. The land rolls more noticeably. The horizon becomes more varied. The transition is gradual enough that you almost miss it. The West rarely transforms all at once. It evolves mile by mile, step by step. The wagon train continues following established routes. The rhythm remains familiar. Wheels creak, oxen pull, dust rises. Yet a growing sense of anticipation accompanies the movement. The mountains represent future difficulties. They also represent future rewards. Both realities exist simultaneously. A continuing subject of historical interest involves how emigrants emotionally responded to approaching mountain country. Researchers examining diaries and letters have found evidence of excitement, anxiety, confidence, uncertainty, and wonder, often appearing together in the same accounts. That combination feels understandable. The mountains inspire admiration. They also inspire respect. Large obstacles tend to produce both reactions. You spend part of the afternoon walking beside a traveller who has never seen mountains before. The excitement is obvious. Questions arrive continuously. Do they look larger up close? How cold does it become there? Are there forests, streams, snow? The final question lingers briefly. Snow. It still feels distant. The summer sun remains warm. The prairie remains green. Yet the mention serves as a reminder. Time matters. Season matters. Every westbound traveller understands this, even if they prefer not to dwell on it. The first snowfall may still be far away. Nobody wishes to meet it unexpectedly. Toward evening, the mountains glow faintly beneath golden sunlight. The sight is beautiful, almost painterly. Blue peaks suspended above rolling grasslands. The contrast feels dramatic. Two landscapes meeting at the edge of vision. The wagon train eventually reaches camp. The routine unfolds as usual. Animals are cared for, fires are lit, food is prepared. Yet tonight, people spend more time looking west. The mountains remain visible even as daylight fades, their silhouettes darken against the sky. Mysterious, imposing, inviting. You sit beside the fire while listening to conversation. Stories about mountains circulate freely. Some are accurate, some are undoubtedly embellished. That distinction becomes increasingly difficult to determine after supper. A particularly amusing recollection from one emigrant described a campfire argument regarding whether mountain lions were actually lions, unusually large cats, or something else entirely. The debate reportedly lasted hours. No mountain lions attended to clarify the issue. The stars appear overhead, the peaks gradually disappear into darkness, yet their presence remains. You know they are there, waiting. The prairie has carried the wagon train a long way. Soon other landscapes will take over, forests, passes, rising terrain, new challenges, new wonders. For now, however, the camp rests peacefully beneath the summer sky. The fire crackles softly. Voices fade. The mountains sleep beyond the horizon. And somewhere in the quiet darkness between prairie and peak, the next stage of the journey waits patiently for your arrival. By now, you have developed a new appreciation for animals, not in the abstract sense. Not the sort of appreciation expressed in poetry or paintings. A practical appreciation. A deeply personal appreciation. The kind that develops when your progress across a continent depends upon creatures with 4 legs and opinions of their own. Every morning before the wagon train begins moving, you hear them. Oxen shifting in the grass, mules stamping impatiently, horses snorting into the cool air, cattle wandering in search of breakfast. The sounds have become as familiar as the creak of wagon wheels, perhaps more familiar. Without the animals, the journey stops. That simple truth shapes nearly every aspect of life on the trail. A foundational reality of Oregon trail travel was that draft animals provided the power that moved wagons westward. Oxen, in particular, became the preferred choice for many emigrants because of their endurance, strength, and ability to survive difficult conditions. You watch the oxen grazing during the early morning light. Their pace never seems hurried. They chew thoughtfully, move deliberately, rest whenever possible. There's a certain wisdom in their approach. Human beings constantly worry about tomorrow. Oxen seem perfectly content focusing on breakfast. The wagon train begins moving shortly after sunrise. The animals settle into their familiar rhythm. Step, pull, step, pull. Hour after hour, day after day. The consistency is remarkable. You walk alongside them, listening to harnesses creak gently. Leather straps stretch and relax with each movement. Dust rises around sturdy hooves. The prairie rolls endlessly westward. Many emigrants eventually developed strong emotional attachments to their animals. This is not difficult to understand. Shared hardship often creates affection, especially when survival depends upon cooperation. You know which ox walks slightly faster than the others, which mule dislikes sudden noises, which horse becomes restless during storms. The animals become individuals rather than equipment. That transformation happens naturally. A charming historical detail appears in several emigrant diaries involving travellers giving affectionate nicknames to oxen and mules. Some animals became minor celebrities within wagon trains because of unusual habits, stubborn personalities, or remarkable reliability. Apparently, celebrity culture existed even on the Great Plains. The audience was simply smaller. As the morning unfolds, the wagon train encounters a gentle rise in the terrain. Nothing particularly challenging, yet the effort required becomes immediately visible. The oxen lean into their work, Muscles tighten, the wagons slow. Every incline reveals the enormous responsibility these animals carry. You gain renewed respect with every hill. The mountains remain distant, yet even modest elevations remind travellers that geography never stops asking questions. Can your wagon handle this? Can your animals handle this? Can you? The prairie continues stretching beneath a brilliant sky. You notice several travellers checking their livestock during a brief stop. Water is offered, harnesses are inspected. Small injuries receive attention. Animal care occupies a significant portion of daily life. Ignoring such responsibilities would be foolish. The animals represent transportation, labour, security, opportunity, future plans, all wrapped together beneath hides and harnesses. An unusual anecdote preserved in one emigrant account describes a particularly clever mule that reportedly learned how to untie simple knots. The owner spent much of the journey retying ropes while the mule continued demonstrating its unexpected talents. The mule appeared delighted, the owner considerably less so. Around midday, lunch is served beneath scattered clouds. The animals rest nearby. Many simply graze. Others stand quietly in the shade. You sit watching them while eating. The relationship between people and animals feels especially visible here. Neither group reaches Oregon without the other. The partnership may not always be elegant. It remains essential. A subject that continues generating discussion among historians involves the comparative performance of different draft animals on the trail. Evidence suggests that oxen often outperformed expectations despite appearing slower and less glamorous than horses. Appearances can be deceptive. Steady persistence frequently wins contests that speed alone cannot. The afternoon passes peacefully. The mountains remain visible ahead. The prairie continues changing in subtle ways. Grass grows shorter in some places. The terrain feels slightly more varied. Nothing dramatic, just enough to hint that the journey's evolving. The animals notice these changes too, perhaps not in the same way humans do, but they respond to terrain, weather, and available grazing with constant attention. A horse lifts its head toward the wind. An ox pauses near particularly appealing grass. A mule evaluates a muddy patch with obvious skepticism. The animals participate in the journey actively rather than passively. That distinction becomes increasingly clear. Later in the afternoon, a brief delay occurs when several cattle wander farther than intended. Recovery takes time. People spread out. Calls echo across the prairie. Eventually the missing animals return. Order is restored. The wagon train continues. Moments like these reveal another reality of trail life. Movement depends upon organization. Organization depends upon patience. Patience depends upon accepting occasional inconveniences. The Oregon Trail offers endless opportunities to practice that skill. A lesser-known observation from emigrant writings notes that some travellers claimed certain animals seemed capable of recognizing familiar campsites or frequently travelled routes. Whether entirely accurate or partially wishful thinking remains difficult to determine. Still, the stories persisted. People often attribute intelligence to creatures they respect, and respect for these animals grows stronger every mile. The sun begins descending toward the horizon. Golden light washes across the prairie. The animals cast long shadows over the grass. The scene feels peaceful, almost timeless. Camp eventually appears. The familiar evening routine begins once more. Animals receive immediate attention before many people even think about their own comfort. Water first, feed first, care first. The priorities make sense. Tomorrow's travel depends upon tonight's preparation. You help with evening chores while listening to nearby conversations. Stories circulate. Laughter drifts through camp. The smell of supper fills the cooling air. Nearby, several oxen continue grazing calmly as though they have not spent the entire day pulling heavy wagons across the plains. Their composure remains impressive. Night settles gradually. The stars emerge overhead. The camp grows quieter. You sit beside the fire and watch the animals resting nearby. Tomorrow they will rise before dawn. Tomorrow they will pull once more. Tomorrow they will continue carrying families toward distant hopes and uncertain futures. The Oregon Trail may be remembered through the stories of people, yet tonight, beneath a sky filled with stars, it feels only fair to acknowledge the silent workers whose strength makes those stories possible. One morning, you wake and immediately know something has changed. The difference is subtle. So subtle that you might miss it if you were not living outdoors every day. The air feels cooler, not cold, just cooler. The breeze carries a sharper edge. The sunrise arrives a little later than it once did, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet realization begins forming. Summer is moving on. The prairie still looks vibrant. Grass still waves beneath the wind. The sky remains broad and blue, yet small signs of change are appearing everywhere. The season is slowly turning the page. A well-established feature of Oregon Trail travel was the constant awareness of time and season. Emigrants carefully monitored their progress because reaching critical mountain regions before severe winter weather could make an enormous difference. You sit beside the morning fire holding a warm cup of coffee. The heat feels especially pleasant today. A month ago, the same temperature might have seemed almost chilly. Perspective changes remarkably fast. The wagon train breaks camp and begins moving westward. As the wheels roll forward, you notice how many conversations now include references to the calendar. Not exact dates necessarily, more general observations. How long have we been travelling? How much farther remains? How many weeks until autumn deepens? Nobody seems alarmed. Not yet, but awareness is growing. The mountains ahead appear slightly larger than before. Their outlines stand clearer against the western sky. The sight excites people. It also encourages calculations. Distance is no longer just geography. It is becoming a question of timing. The morning passes beneath scattered clouds. The prairie remains beautiful. Golden grasses now appear more frequently among the green. Wildflowers seem less abundant than earlier in the season. The changes are gradual enough that they feel natural rather than dramatic. Nature rarely rushes. A delightful observation preserved in trail journals describes emigrants becoming amateur weather forecasters as the seasons progressed. Individuals who previously paid little attention to climate suddenly developed strong opinions regarding winds, clouds, and temperature trends. Confidence frequently exceeded expertise. The weather remained politely unconvinced. Around midday, the wagon train pauses beside a stream. Lunch unfolds in familiar fashion. Food is prepared. Animals rest. People seek shade. Yet the conversation today feels slightly different. The future occupies more space. You listen as travellers discuss mountain passes still ahead. Some estimate arrival dates. Others compare information gathered from guidebooks and previous travellers. No one possesses complete certainty. The trail rarely offers complete certainty. That may be one reason so many people discuss it. Humans often talk most about things they cannot fully control. A widely recognized historical reality is that successful westward migration often depended upon balancing steady progress with careful decision-making. Moving too slowly could create seasonal challenges, while rushing introduced risks of its own. The balance was never simple. It remains challenging even in conversation. The afternoon unfolds beneath bright sunshine, yet despite the warmth, subtle reminders of approaching autumn continue appearing. A cooler breeze arrives. The shadows seem slightly longer. The sunlight itself feels different somehow. Softer, more golden, less intense than it was weeks earlier. Perhaps you are imagining it. Perhaps not. The prairie offers countless details for attentive observers. An unusual tidbit from emigrant recollections involves travellers collecting early signs of seasonal change almost like trophies. The first yellow leaf, the first noticeably cool dawn, the first flock of migrating birds all attracted attention. People notice transitions when their lives depend upon them. You walk beside the wagon while watching birds wheel across the sky. The sight prompts reflection. Everything is moving. The birds, the wagon train, the seasons. Even the mountains seem closer now. Nothing remains still for long. An area of continuing discussion among historians concerns how accurately emigrants estimated their chances of reaching key destinations before winter conditions intensified. Personal journals reveal a wide range of expectations, confidence levels, and interpretations of risk. Some travellers worried constantly, others remained remarkably optimistic. Human nature has always offered multiple approaches to uncertainty. The afternoon gradually cools. Clouds drift across the sun. The landscape feels peaceful, yet beneath that calm lies growing determination. The wagon train understands the importance of progress. Nobody wishes to waste daylight. Nobody wishes to lose momentum. The first snowfall remains somewhere in the future. Even so, its distant possibility now occupies occasional thoughts. Not fear. Awareness. Those are different things. Later in the day, you pass through an area where the grass shimmers with late-season colour. Gold mingles with green. The effect is beautiful, almost painterly. Several travellers pause briefly to admire the view. The prairie is preparing for autumn long before winter arrives. The process has already begun. A memorable anecdote recorded by one emigrant described a child announcing that the grass was changing clothes for the cold season. The explanation lacked botanical precision, but possessed considerable charm. Sometimes simple observations capture truth surprisingly well. The wagon train reaches camp near sunset. The evening air cools quickly. Many people notice. Several travellers pull blankets closer around their shoulders during supper. The fire seems slightly more inviting than usual, not because the weather is harsh, because the weather is changing. The distinction matters. You sit beside the flames watching sparks drift upward. The mountains glow faintly in the distance, dark blue beneath the fading sky. Conversations continue around the camp. Routes, weather, distances, plans. The familiar topics return once more. Yet tonight they carry an added layer of urgency. Not panic, not anxiety. Just awareness. The season is advancing whether anyone discusses it or not. The stars emerge overhead, clear and brilliant. The fire crackles softly. A cool breeze moves through the camp. You pull your blanket a little closer and stare toward the western horizon. The journey continues. The mountains are waiting. Autumn is approaching, and somewhere far beyond the visible horizon, the first snow of the year is quietly making its way toward the same landscape you're crossing. For now, however, the night remains calm, the camp remains warm, and the wagon train sleeps beneath a sky that still belongs to summer, even as the first hints of another season begin whispering across the plains. The conversations begin quietly, a passing remark during breakfast, a casual observation while walking, a question raised around the evening fire. At first, nobody pays much attention. Then the topic returns, and returns again. Soon it seems to appear everywhere. The first snow, not today's snow, not next week's snow, just the idea of it. A distant event still waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. yet increasingly present in people's thoughts. You notice the change gradually. The wagon train continues moving beneath clear skies. The grass still glows beneath warm sunlight. The afternoons remain pleasant. Nothing about the weather suggests immediate danger, and yet the calendar keeps moving forward. The mountains keep growing larger. The journey keeps advancing toward higher country. A central concern for many westbound emigrants involved timing their progress carefully enough to avoid severe winter conditions in critical mountain regions. Seasonal awareness became more important as travellers pushed farther west. This morning begins with crisp air and a bright sunrise. The camp stirs awake. Coffee brews. Animals graze. The familiar routines continue. Yet while helping prepare breakfast, you overhear two travellers discussing mileage estimates, not because they enjoy arithmetic, because numbers have become connected to weather. Every mile completed now feels doubly valuable. 1 mile closer to Oregon, 1 mile farther from winter risk. The relationship is simple enough. Progress equals opportunity. Delay equals uncertainty. The wagon train moves forward beneath a pale blue sky. The mountains dominate the western horizon now. Their presence feels less symbolic than before, less distant, more immediate. You can study individual ridges, observe changes in colour, watch clouds gathering around higher elevations. The landscape is revealing more of itself. A curious tidbit preserved in several emigrant journals describes travellers developing elaborate theories about mountain weather, based entirely on cloud shapes. Some predictions proved accurate. Others displayed impressive creativity. The clouds continued following their own plans regardless. As the morning unfolds, you notice a new pattern. People ask more questions. How far is the next major landmark? How quickly are we travelling? What did the travellers coming east report? Information has become valuable currency. Every conversation might contain useful knowledge. A passing comment from another wagon train could influence decisions for days. The trail creates appreciation for reliable information. It also creates appreciation for rumours. The difference is not always obvious at first. Around midday, the wagon train stops near a stream. The lunch break feels familiar. The conversations do not. The topic returns once more. Snow, not because anyone sees it, because nobody wants to see it too soon. You sit near the water while listening to a group debate travel schedules. Some favour caution, others emphasise speed. Most recognise the challenge of balancing both. Moving too quickly can exhaust animals. Moving too slowly can create future complications. The trail rarely offers perfect solutions, only choices. A noteworthy aspect of westward migration was the importance of judgment. Guidebooks provided advice, but daily decisions still depended upon observation, experience, and circumstance. No handbook could predict every season. No map could guarantee success. The afternoon passes beneath scattered clouds. A cool breeze drifts across the prairie. You find yourself paying more attention to temperature than you once did. Perhaps everyone does. Awareness spreads quietly through the group. Nobody wishes to become obsessed with winter. Ignoring it entirely would be unwise. An ongoing historical discussion concerns how accurately emigrants assessed seasonal risks while travelling. Historians examining letters and journals continue exploring whether travellers generally underestimated, overestimated, or realistically interpreted the challenges posed by changing weather conditions. The evidence suggests considerable variety. Some worried constantly, some hardly worried at all. Most likely existed somewhere between those extremes. Later in the day, a flock of birds passes overhead. Several travellers stop to watch. Migration observing migration. The thought feels strangely appropriate. The birds know something about seasonal timing. Their journey follows rhythms older than wagon trails, older than roads, older than maps. The sight sparks conversation. Everything seems to spark conversation these days. The first snow has become a recurring character in people's imaginations, invisible, distant, yet frequently discussed. A particularly memorable story from one trail recollection describes a traveller who claimed he could predict the coming season by studying the behaviour of squirrels. The scientific basis remained questionable. The confidence remained extraordinary. Human beings often seek certainty where certainty does not exist. The prairie provides endless opportunities for that habit. As evening approaches, sunlight softens into gold. The mountains glow faintly ahead. The landscape feels peaceful. Nothing about it suggests urgency. That is part of what makes seasonal change so interesting. Important events often announce themselves quietly, not through drama, through accumulation. One cooler morning, one earlier sunset, one longer shadow. The signs gather slowly until they become impossible to ignore. Camp forms near a stretch of good grazing land. The animals appear healthy. The water supply is dependable. The atmosphere remains positive. No one is panicking. No one is despairing. The wagon train simply understands that time matters, that awareness influences behaviour without dominating it. The evening fire burns warmly. People gather round familiar circles of light. Stories continue. Laughter continues. Life continues. The first snow may be a topic of discussion, but it has not stolen the present moment. You sit beside the flames and look west. The mountains rest beneath fading light. The sky deepens from orange to purple. Stars begin appearing one by one. A cool breeze brushes across the camp. The sensation feels refreshing, not threatening, just different. The season is changing. The journey is changing too. Soon the prairie will gradually surrender to new landscapes, new elevations, new challenges. For tonight, however, the wagon train remains comfortably settled beneath the open sky. The animals rest. The fires glow. The conversations soften. And somewhere far beyond the visible horizon, winter continues its slow approach while hundreds of emigrants quietly calculate whether they can stay one step ahead of it. The prairie gradually begins surrendering its dominance, not all at once. The transformation happens in stages. The land rises. The horizon narrows. The mountains, once distant decorations painted along the edge of the world, now occupy a much larger share of your attention. Every day they appear closer. Every day they reveal new details. And every day the wagon train edges nearer to the country where elevation begins making its presence known. This morning arrives cool and clear. The sunrise paints the western peaks in soft shades of gold and pink. For a few moments, the mountains seem almost gentle. Then daylight strengthens and their true scale becomes visible once again. They are enormous, beautiful, and completely indifferent to human plans. A commonly recognized fact about the Oregon Trail is that emigrants eventually faced increasingly challenging terrain as they approached and crossed mountain regions. Elevation, weather, and route conditions often became more significant than they had been on the open plains. You begin walking shortly after sunrise. The air feels different here, thinner. Not quite, but somehow cleaner, sharper. The breeze carries scents unfamiliar to the prairie. The landscape itself seems to be preparing for change. The wagon train continues forward at its steady pace. The animals pull patiently, the wheels turn faithfully, yet the terrain now demands more attention. Gentle inclines appear more frequently. Rolling ground replaces long stretches of flat prairie. Nothing difficult yet. Just enough to remind everyone that easier country is gradually fading behind them. You watch the mountains throughout the morning. The peaks rise above the horizon like giant stone islands. Clouds gather around their summits. Shadows move across distant slopes. The view feels almost hypnotic. No matter how often you look, your eyes drift back again. A particularly interesting detail from emigrant writings describes travellers occasionally overestimating how quickly mountain travel would begin. Some expected dramatic changes immediately, only to discover that transitions often unfolded more gradually than anticipated. The West rarely rushes. It prefers long introductions. Around mid-morning, the wagon train pauses briefly near a stream. The water runs cold and clear. Several travellers comment on the temperature. Mountain water possesses a reputation. It tends to earn it. You kneel beside the stream and splash water across your face. The sensation is refreshing enough to make you reconsider every complaint about warm prairie afternoons. Nearby, people study maps and discuss routes. The conversations have become increasingly detailed. Mountain passes, river crossings, distances, timetables. The future feels closer now. Planning becomes more specific. The mountains no longer exist as abstract obstacles. They are approaching realities. The wagon train resumes movement. The sky remains brilliantly blue. Sunlight illuminates rocky outcrops that would have seemed unusual weeks earlier. The scenery continues evolving. You find yourself noticing every change. A cluster of trees, a steeper hill, a cooler breeze. The journey teaches observation. Perhaps because observation often becomes useful. Perhaps because the landscape deserves attention. Likely both. An area that continues attracting scholarly interest involves how emigrants emotionally responded to mountain country after spending weeks or months on the plains. Personal accounts reveal a mixture of excitement, relief, apprehension, and admiration. Watching the wagon train, that combination feels entirely reasonable. The mountains inspire many emotions simultaneously. Simple reactions seem inadequate. Lunch occurs beneath scattered trees. Shade feels welcome. The mountains dominate the western skyline. Even while eating, people continue studying them. Speculation remains popular. How difficult will the roads be? How much colder will it become? How long until the first pass? No one possesses perfect answers. The mountains keep most of their secrets until you arrive. A delightful anecdote preserved in one travel journal describes a child insisting that the mountains grew larger every time the wagon train stopped for lunch. The observation was technically incorrect and emotionally accurate. That is often the best kind of observation. The afternoon unfolds peacefully. The terrain continues rising gradually. Nothing dramatic occurs, yet you sense a growing awareness throughout the group. The plains feel farther away now. The journey is entering another phase. The realization carries weight. People have become accustomed to prairie routines, the open horizon, the broad rivers, the endless grass. New landscapes require new adjustments. Fortunately, adaptation has become one of the wagon train's strengths. Weeks of travel have taught valuable lessons. Patience, flexibility, endurance. All three remain useful here. As sunlight begins softening toward evening, the mountains become spectacular. Their slopes glow beneath golden light. Dark forests appear along certain ridges. Higher elevations catch the last rays of the sun. The scene feels almost unreal. Many travellers pause simply to admire it. Moments like this remind you why so many emigrants recorded detailed descriptions in journals and letters. Some landscapes demand documentation. A continuing topic among historians concerns how much artistic and emotional language in emigrant accounts reflected genuine wonder versus retrospective memory. Whatever the answer, Many surviving descriptions reveal authentic admiration for Western scenery. Standing here, admiration feels unavoidable. The wagon train eventually reaches camp. The location offers water, grazing, and a view of the mountains. 3 valuable qualities. The evening routine unfolds comfortably. Animals rest. Fires burn. Supper cooks. Conversation drifts through the cool air. Tonight, the temperature drops noticeably after sunset. Not enough to create hardship, enough to attract attention. Several travellers pull blankets around their shoulders sooner than usual. Nobody complains. They simply notice. Awareness has become second nature. You sit beside the fire and watch darkness settle across the mountains. The peaks fade into shadow. The stars emerge overhead. The sky appears impossibly clear. The cool air carries the scent of pine from somewhere beyond the visible ridges. The prairie is no longer the entire story. The mountains are beginning to introduce themselves. Tomorrow the wagon train will move closer. Tomorrow the train will rise again. Tomorrow new challenges and new beauty await. For tonight, however, the camp rests quietly beneath a sky crowded with stars, while the great western mountain stands silent beyond the firelight, waiting patiently for travellers to enter their world. The closer you draw to the mountains, the more deliberate everything becomes. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is wasted. The wagon train has travelled too far to become careless now. Every decision feels slightly more important. Every repair receives closer attention. Every evening camp seems a little busier than before. The first snowfall has not arrived. The weather remains manageable. Yet preparation is increasingly woven into daily life. You notice it from the moment you wake. Before sunrise, several travellers are already inspecting equipment beside the fading embers of last night's fire. A wheel is examined, harness straps are checked, supplies are counted. The activities feel familiar. The intensity feels new. People are thinking ahead. The mountains have a way of encouraging that. A widely recognised reality of overland migration was that successful travellers regularly inspected and maintained equipment throughout the journey. Wagons, tools, harnesses, and supplies endured enormous stress over hundreds of miles of rough travel. You stretch beside the wagon and watch the camp awaken. The air carries a noticeable chill, not severe, just enough to remind you that the season continues advancing. Nearby, someone adds extra wood to the morning fire. The warmth immediately attracts company. Human beings remain remarkably predictable when temperatures drop. The wagon train begins moving shortly after sunrise. The mountains dominate the western horizon. They no longer seem distant. They feel present. The landscape rises steadily. Forests appear more frequently. Streams run colder. The environment itself seems to be preparing for a different season. The travellers are doing the same. You overhear discussions about blankets, extra clothing, food supplies, firewood. The topics repeat throughout the day. Not obsessively, practically. Experience has taught the wagon train an important lesson. Small preparations performed early often prevent larger problems later. An intriguing detail from emigrant journals describes travellers occasionally collecting useful materials whenever opportunities appeared. Extra wood, spare wagon parts, and even simple cordage might be gathered and stored against future need. The instinct makes sense. Abundance today can become scarcity tomorrow. The morning unfolds beneath clear skies. The weather remains cooperative. The mountains glow softly beneath sunlight. You walk beside the wagon listening to familiar sounds. Wheels turning, harnesses creaking, boots brushing through grass. The rhythm remains comforting. The journey has changed many things. Its daily cadence remains reassuringly familiar. Around midday, the wagon train pauses near a small stream. Lunch is simple. Conversation is not. People discuss routes ahead, possible campsites, expected conditions. The atmosphere feels thoughtful, measured, not fearful, prepared. There is a difference. Preparation acknowledges challenges without surrendering to them. You sit beside the water watching several travellers repair equipment during the break. One sharpens tools, another reinforces part of a wagon frame, a third reorganises supplies. The scene resembles a moving workshop, a mobile village constantly maintaining itself. Researchers continue examining how emigrants balance preparation against practical limitations. Historical evidence suggests that travellers often had to decide which potential future problems deserved attention, and which could simply not be anticipated. No one can prepare for everything. The trick lies in preparing for enough. The afternoon brings gentle clouds drifting across the sky. Their shadows move across hills and grasslands. The scenery grows increasingly dramatic. Rock formations appear. Wooded slopes rise in the distance. The prairie feels farther away with each passing mile, yet traces remain. The open sky still stretches overhead. The horizon still invites long thoughts. The transition between landscapes feels gradual and graceful. A memorable anecdote from one emigrant account tells of a traveller who repeatedly reorganized his wagon in pursuit of perfect efficiency. After dozens of adjustments, he reportedly concluded that perfection remained elusive, but exhaustion was readily available. The wagon won that contest. As afternoon deepens, attention turns increasingly toward camp. Not because people are tired, though they are, because evening preparations now carry additional importance. The nights are cooler. Fuel matters more. Shelter matters more. Small comforts matter more. You notice travellers gathering extra firewood before reaching camp. The habit has become common. Nobody wishes to spend a cold evening wishing they had collected one more armful. The mountains loom larger than ever. Their slopes catch the afternoon light. The sight inspires admiration. It also inspires realism. These landscapes demand respect. The wagon train understands that. An area of continuing scholarly discussion concerns how emigrants perceived risk before entering more demanding terrain. Some accounts suggest confidence built through months of successful travel, while others reveal increasing caution as environmental challenges became more apparent. Human responses varied. They always do. The wagon train finally reaches camp in a sheltered location near water and grazing. Approval spreads quickly. A good campsite feels valuable at any time. It feels especially valuable now. The routine begins immediately. Animals are cared for. Wood is gathered. Meals are prepared. The evening air cools faster than it did weeks ago. Blankets emerge sooner. People linger closer to the fires. You help gather fuel and notice how satisfying the task feels. There is comfort in preparation. Comfort in knowing tomorrow has been considered. The smell of wood smoke drifts through camp. The aroma feels almost seasonal, as if autumn itself has arrived quietly and taken a seat beside the fire. Dinner is shared. Stories are exchanged. The familiar social life of the wagon train continues. Yet beneath the conversation lies awareness. The journey is approaching another threshold. The mountains are near. The season is changing. The first snowfall remains unseen. No one knows exactly when it will appear. That uncertainty encourages planning. You sit beside the fire watching sparks rise into the darkening sky. The stars emerge one by one. The mountains fade into shadow. The camp grows quieter. Tomorrow will bring more miles, more preparation, more movement toward higher country. For tonight, however, everything necessary has been done. The wagons are secure, the animals are resting, the fires burn warmly, and beneath a sky filled with stars, The wagon train settles into sleep, carrying with it the comforting belief that readiness, even if imperfect, remains one of the best companions a traveller can have. The first snow has not arrived, and yet, somehow, it feels close. Not visible, not present, just waiting somewhere beyond the mountains and beyond the days still ahead. The awareness settles quietly across the wagon train. Nobody wakes this morning to find white fields or frozen wagons. Instead, you wake beneath a sky washed pale blue by dawn. The air is crisp, the camp is peaceful. A thin layer of dew sparkles across the grass. The season has advanced enough that mornings now feel noticeably different from those early weeks on the prairie. You pull a blanket around your shoulders and sit beside the fire. The warmth feels wonderful. Months ago, the same fire might have been appreciated. Today, it feels necessary. The journey has changed. You have changed too. A broadly accepted historical reality is that emigrants approaching the latter portions of the travel season often became increasingly conscious of weather and timing, especially when mountain travel still lay ahead. The concern does not dominate every thought. It simply exists. A steady companion walking quietly beside the wagon train. You watch the camp awaken. Coffee brews. Animals stir. The familiar sounds continue. In many ways, life remains exactly as it was. Yet in other ways, everything feels different. The trail has become familiar. The routines have become familiar. The people have become familiar. What once seemed extraordinary now feels normal. The transformation happened so gradually that you barely noticed. The wagon train begins moving shortly after sunrise. The mountains stand ahead, larger than ever. The land rises gently beneath the wheels. The air smells of pine and earth. The prairie has largely surrendered its role as the dominant landscape. A new world is emerging. You walk beside the wagon and think about all the miles already travelled. The Missouri River feels impossibly far away. The dusty camps, the buffalo herds, the thunderstorms, the long evenings beneath endless stars. They belong to the same journey, yet they feel almost like memories from another lifetime. An especially touching detail found in some emigrant journals describes travellers occasionally realising they could no longer remember the exact appearance of places they had left behind. Faces remained clear. Emotions remained clear. Certain details began fading. Distance changes memory in unexpected ways. The morning passes quietly. The wagon train moves steadily. Nobody wastes energy. Nobody hurries unnecessarily. Experience has taught the value of consistency. 1 mile, then another, then another. That simple formula has carried the journey this far. Around midday, the traveller stopped beside a stream flowing from higher country. The water feels remarkably cold. You kneel beside it and watch sunlight dance across the surface. The mountains reflect faintly in the current. For a moment, everything feels peaceful, timeless. The kind of moment unlikely to appear in official reports, yet deeply memorable to the people who lived it. Lunch unfolds in the usual fashion. Food is shared. Conversations drift between campsites. Laughter appears. So do quiet moments. Many travellers seem reflective today. Perhaps it is the mountains. Perhaps it is the season. Perhaps long journeys naturally encourage contemplation. A continuing topic among researchers involves how emigrants perceived the passage of time during migration. Diaries often suggest that individual days felt long, while entire months seemed to pass surprisingly quickly. The contradiction feels familiar. The trail contains endless individual moments. Together they become a blur. The afternoon sunlight paints the landscape in rich colours. Gold, green, deep blue. The scenery seems determined to leave a lasting impression. You find yourself appreciating small details more than before: the sound of a creek, the scent of wood smoke lingering from lunch, the rhythm of wagon wheels, the call of distant birds. Perhaps familiarity has sharpened your attention rather than dulling it. A charming anecdote recorded by one traveller tells of a child who became convinced that the mountains moved slightly closer every night while everyone slept. The explanation lacked geological support but captured a feeling many adults quietly shared. The destination always seems nearer in the morning. The wagon train continues onward. The mountains dominate the horizon. The season advances, yet the first snow remains absent, still unseen, still hypothetical, still powerful enough to shape decisions. That is one of the most interesting aspects of the journey. Sometimes the most influential things are not present at all. They exist in anticipation, as possibility, as motivation. The evening arrives gently. The wagon train establishes camp in a sheltered location. The routine unfolds one final time before this chapter of the story closes. Animals are watered, fires are lit, supper is prepared. The familiar village appears beneath the open sky. You sit beside the flames and look around. The people gathered here are not the same people who left Missouri. Not entirely. The trail has refined them, tested them, educated them. The same is true of you. Long journeys rarely leave travellers unchanged. The stars emerge overhead. The mountains fade into darkness. The air cools steadily. Someone adds another log to the fire. Sparks drift upward like tiny stars returning home. The conversation softens. The camp grows quiet. And as the night deepens, a final realization settles gently into your thoughts. The story was never really about snow. Not entirely. It was about everything that happened before the snow. The miles, the friendships, the rivers, the storms, the animals, the campfires, the endless horizons, the countless ordinary moments that quietly transformed strangers into a community and a road into a life. And now, as the fire burns low and the stars shine above the mountains, you allow your eyes to rest for a moment. The wagon train sleeps. The season waits. The future remains unwritten. And somewhere beyond the dark ridges to the west, winter is still gathering its strength. For now, though, the night is calm. The air is cool. The camp is safe. And you rest beneath the vast western sky, grateful for the long road already travelled and the quiet beauty of a world still waiting for its first snowfall. Sweet dreams.